They can take your world. They can take your heart. Cut you loose from all you know. But if it's your fate, then every step forward will always be a step closer to home.
So, the fateful day has come and gone, and we've all had our time to digest how we feel, and to either react or to watch others react to the clusterfuck that was the end of this saga. And despite what I just said, I really do love this game. But let's be real here, guys, this game was as big of a divide in early 2019 as, well, Pokemon was in late 2019. Regardless, the game means so many things to so many people. Perhaps you wanted to see how it all ended. Maybe you like the spectacle of it all. Or maybe you're just a normie who got the game because it was so heavily marketed before launch and are now complaining about how confusing it all is.
You poor, simple fools.
The difference is that I'm willing to write a 48,000 word script about the quality of the game rather than a 10,000 word dissertation on whether or not the game is too floaty. However, unlike last time, I want to look at what made the game so heavily debated, which means we're gonna get real friggin' pretentious. Oh joy, kill me. Call this what you will, a retrospective, grandstanding, an incoherent ramble, I don't know. Me? I'm going with a legacy. So join me, won't you, as we look over the legacy of Kingdom Hearts 3. Before I start any of this, I think I should lay all my cards on the table for how I went about getting the footage for this behemoth of a video. For Kingdom Hearts 3, I went about using the smooth setting so the game didn't suffer in any of its rendering. Sorry you 60 FPS snobs, but I just couldn't play the game that way without my eyes hurting whenever Sora would slide on the ground. I did 2 playthroughs just standard as they come, one on standard with just the Kingdom Key, the attractions for giggles, some items, a summon or two, and armor so as to get the cutscenes and have everything look the same for both this and my Finding the Funny series. On the second playthrough, I did it all on critical mode with no attractions, New Game Plus, and world-specific Keyblades. So for Toy Box, I used Favorite Deputy, and Corona, I used Ever After. I did this so that you're not looking at the Kingdom Key the whole video, and so that I can say that I played and beat the game on both ends of the extreme of difficulty so as to have a full playing experience. And as of the release of the DLC, I also went through 2 more playthroughs with the Black Card mode and the Fast Pass mode. Those 2 playthroughs I will discuss in the Remind section when we get there. Also, I'm just gonna get all my biases out on the game and the series, so you all know where I'm coming from in terms of what I like. Favorite character? Sora. Favorite of each trio? Sora, Axel, and Ventus. Favorite world in the game? Corona. Favorite world in the series? The world that never was. Favorite boss fight? Vanitas. Favorite in the series? Data Roxas. Favorite org member? Larxene. Favorite Keyblade? Favorite Deputy. Favorite across the series? Decisive Pumpkin. Now the least favorites. Kairi, Xion, and I guess Aqua, but that's more by default. Arendelle, Deep Jungle, the Grim Guardianess, Data Zoldan, Marluxia, Classic Tone, and Guardian Soul. Oh, also, just for those of you who care, here's how I rank the overall games in the Darkseeker saga from worst to best, excluding Melody and Memories because at the time of this recording it hasn't come out yet. Take those as you will, and let's do this, bitch! So one thing this game was criticized for, more so than anything else, was the graphical change. The series is known for being stuck on hardware comparable to, or less powerful as, the PS2, which is what Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 were originally released on. And because of this hardware limitation, the crew opted to reuse models and flat out clone one of them. In KH1, Rechain, Recoded, and... we don't really have an HD name for Dream Drop Distance, do we? How about the Redrop Edition? You know, for the sake of clarity. Sound good? No? Well, too bad. That's what we're doing. Get on board with it. Sora's KH1 model is used in its entirety for Kingdom Hearts 1, Rechain, and Recoded. Hell, even Kingdom Hearts 2 starts with it, and has a whole world that calls back to it, albeit in black and white. We get to jump around in it for a few seconds in this game, and in Redropped it's the same basic outline, but with a coat flap added to the bottom of his torso and a new texture put on top of it for plot reasons. This is the only reason Sora and Riku have new designs in the first place. Plot. Sora has it so that the organization can find him, and Riku, well, Riku's in Sora's dream, and I guess this is what he wants his boyfriend to look like. And I must say, 2 thumbs way up from his KH2 design. Actually, come to think of it, this is his best outfit, second only to his KH3 outfit. And from KH2 onward, Sora, Riku, and Kairi, we'll get to her later, I promise you that, are all just in that game's outfits because it's easier than coding them in wearing anything else when the models are just sitting there in the void. And in most games that aren't numbered, these 2 take a backseat to what's going on in the story, and Kairi gets her hair done for like the 50th time on what I'm just going to have to assume is Mickey's credit card. Roxas, Ven, Vanitas, Sora, Xemnas, and Terra resemble each other because it's easier to just recolor his clothes, stick his head on his body, and change their eye and hair color than it is to make new character models for a series that has churned out 10 games on the hardware of a baked potato for 17 years. This even applies to Naminé and Xion if you really think about it. Just cut the hair and then dye it black or blonde and then you're done. And because of this limitation, all of the games look the same up until 0.2 because cutting corners is what game devs do best. The only 2 characters that are unique on their own are Aqua and Xehanort because there are no other people that can fit that description without looking like Nomura is trying to create everything out of fucking nowhere and just repainting his dolls when he's bored. Why bring all of this up when the graphics are the point rather than the character design? Well, the simple reason is that if every game had the Unreal Engine 4 powering it, or even if the interim games had enough of a budget, this would not be the case. Anyway, the fandom was split over this upon the first real trailer's release, and from what I remember, no one totally loved it. In fact, up until the engine switch was revealed, everyone thought the teaser trailer was just a highly rendered trailer like a lot of the other games had. As for me, I never really saw a difference between 0.2 and 3 until the opening scene of 3 when you can really tell, since it's the same scene that ends 0.2. The graphics themselves are fine, and because all the models exist within the same engine, it makes for some really interesting things that have never really been done before that really shake up how things can look, and I hope it continues from here on out. I will say it is odd that they used old cutscenes rather than make them in-engine, but I kinda get why. It would take up a lot of work time and they were kinda on a time crunch, but we'll get to that later. Let's take the 2 obvious worlds that really highlight Kingdom Hearts 3's effort in its design. The 100-acre woods and the Caribbean. No, seriously, these 2 do prove my point. Just stay with me on this one. You see, both of these worlds were in Kingdom Hearts 2, and because of that we can use them to compare what 13 years and several development teams can do in terms of creative ideas. Pooh's book has the aesthetic of, well, Pooh's storybook. meaning that everything around you looks incredibly flat, and the textures on the trees, grass, and dirt all look as if they were hand-drawn in an old storybook. And Port Royale looks like what would happen if you tried to make, well, any live-action movie tie-in game, only this time more rounded so as not to clash so heavily with Sora and the boys. Speaking of which, every world in this game conforms to how Sora looks, so that it's a smoother transition to having each level look less jarring than it could have been if they had went for the art style of each movie. 3 did the opposite. Not only does Sora have a more realistic texture in the Caribbean and a new outfit, he also gets a new texture with Pooh, which is just a cel-shaded outline, but imagine if Sora looked like he did in Twilight Town when he entered the book. It'd be pretty damn awkward. The other worlds do this as well, albeit to a more subtle degree. Corona and Arendelle make him look the most like his normal self, but you can still see slight differences. It's nothing too big, but again, small details are appreciated. I think we're all used to it by now, but I'm 90% sure the reason none of us notice how different Sora looks in Olympus is down to the fact that outside of 2 cutscenes, one before and one after Olympus, this outfit is permanently set on fire or thrown into the void of space. Or maybe Riku took it to sniff it in the realm of darkness or some shit. I don't know. The point is, the graphics are a big jump, but the reason for that jump is important. Adding to this game's overall style and feel are these Instagram posts that pepper the loading screens, which I think are charming. They're split into 3 different camps. World-specific ones that talk about things that happen in each Disney world, depending on how far along you are in that world's story. Random ones you get at the start of the game so as to avoid spoilers, and ones that talk about stuff that happens in the main plot that only appear after said event. What I like about these is the fact that they're just here to hide a loading screen, or rather to give you something to look at during them, but at the same time, they're pretty funny, and the amount of hashtags is absurd. Every character has an account, and says something different depending on where you are in the story and where you're going, and it's just nice. It's a small thing that makes the loading screens better than what the Final Fantasy VII Remake did with just walking down these hallway-like areas. This is so fun, isn't it? My favorite has to be this one of Elsa in the middle of Let It Go, because this had to have been picked on purpose. I mean, just look at this. She looks so confused, like Sora asked her to pose mid-song, and she just went, wait, what the fuck is that? Oh, okay, here I stand. It's so dumb, and I love it. Are they weird to interject into a series in its 10th installment? Yes. Are they adorable and a low-key fun reason to go world hopping? Also yes. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. As I said above, the older game's hardware having less power than a PS4 made it so that everything being in this PS2 era style really saved it from becoming a joke in terms of its presentation. Well, most of it anyway. And you can't tell me that this cutscene doesn't look better than this one, or that this Aqua fight doesn't look better than this Aqua fight, because I can't buy that. The only reason these two look any different is because the engine got tweaked in the 2 years between launches. The team did put a lot into the cutscenes and lip sync, which isn't to say that they should get praise for putting in the effort, but the visuals are really the only thing I can think of that I'm 100% fine with as is, because an update was needed, and where else to put it other than the end of an era to cap it all off in an extremely pretty package. Plus, let's be real here guys, would you rather have this or this? This or this? That's what I thought. I'm no game dev. I'm not a gigabrain type that can tell you how many polygons are up Sora's nose, or on Donald's never once being used wand, or in Goofy's pissed off expression, but I can tell you that this makes my monkey brain happier than, this. Which is to say nothing of this level's enjoyment. I'm just saying it's hard to look at sometimes. And if anything is going to draw someone in at first glance, more so than anything else, it's the visuals. And in that regard, I think this game hits the bullseye, and will look more timeless than the previous titles since it has their simple character design, but now in an Ultra 4K suck my dick bend me over harder daddy looking edition that worked the PS4 to the bone the way it did. And I mean, come on. More expressive and better facial animation Sora is best Sora. The big problem with talking about Kingdom Hearts combat is that besides someone like Lily Orchard, who likes the way most of the bosses in Birth by Sleep play out, more so than the revenge value system set up in Kingdom Hearts 2, everyone else has one of two opinions. You either love Kingdom Hearts 2 combat and regard it as perfect and flawless and a masterpiece with no flaws in it whatsoever, or you shut your mouth and kiss the game's dick for even being so kind enough to grace you with its presence. I, on the other hand, fall somewhere in the middle of these two stances. I love 2's combat, and I think it's really fun. However, there is one thing that has always bothered me. There are several quality of life benefits that are never explained to you outside of a splash screen that you're either going to button mash your way through or think that the game is pulling a Pokemon and teaching you how to breathe by holding your nose shut and telling you to inhale through your mouth before they get to the really complicated stuff. You guys know MP Safety? That ability you get after being the Demon Tower in Twilight Town in KH3? You want to know why you remember that ability? It's because you get it so early in the game that you go to check it out of sheer curiosity, and its description is so straightforward that you instantly know what it does. Well, KH2 has it as well. Yeah, it shocked me too when I figured it out. You know how you activate it? Why, by going to your magic customization and hitting triangle on each spell individually, of course. How you're meant to figure this out without being told is beyond me, but suffice to say that it makes subsequent playthroughs and grinding much easier when you effectively have endless magic if you stockpile enough ethers. And that's just the first one I could think of. You want to talk about a system that drives me crazy? That's right, dickwads, I'm talking about the reward system. What did you think I was going to bring up? Both of these games have reward systems, and it makes no sense in some cases. For instance, why is one of the Thunder upgrades locked behind the optional boss on the Pride Lands? Because that is some stupid ass shit. And why is Cure locked behind one of the penultimate boss fights rather than, say, one of the Disney Worlds? There are enough mini-bosses and horde encounters that could have given it to you at any point in the game. But no, we needed 3 air dashes because apparently the level geometry was that hard to navigate. Also, why did they wait to give you Combo Master until the Roxas fight? You know, near the end of the game? At least KH3 gave it to you after defeating the Horde of Unverse in the computer room in the middle of the level, in the middle of the game. The drive forms on their own are perfectly fine. I like the cosmetic and combo change on the whole, but why are things like, oh, I don't know, dodge roll locked behind the damn thing? For those of you who don't know, the drive forms were special super modes you can go into that change your base combos and consume one or both of your party members in order to work. And in most cases, you can destroy most bosses or even entire hordes of enemies just by how hard and how fast Sora swung. The first one you get is Valor Form. And what ability does it unlock for you? High Jump, an ability that doesn't need to be upgraded till around middle or the end of the game, and that's mostly for collectibles. You know what would have been a better ability for Valor to give you? Dodge Roll. You already get Gar from leveling up, and since Goofy's the tank, it makes sense for him to give you a defense-heavy ability. Okay, so maybe they wanted you to be able to jump over enemies' attacks. So then why does Limit Form give you Dodge Roll and not Wisdom? You get Wisdom Form pretty early on, and I think it's around the end of the first act of Disney Castle, so why not there? You don't get it till after you go to Twilight Town, near the very end of the game. And then you're given Master Form right after, and then not even an hour later, you unlock the ability to get Final Form. Do you see what I'm getting at here? You spend most of the game with 2 abilities that do fuck all in combat, which is 90% of the whole game, and can't even be leveled up that high until Master Form is obtained, because the number of forms you currently have dictates the max level of all your other forms and their growth abilities, which is a good way of pacing the game so that you don't feel like an overpowered badass in like Land of Dragons. But had Limit Form been given to you in Timeless River, and Wisdom Form in, say, Agrabah, this would have been a lot smoother of a transition and wouldn't have made the back half of the game feel so grindy. I need to drill this home. The drive forms are an interesting concept and tie into the series' theme of my friends are my power, but I also acknowledge the fact that had the final mixed version of the game given you the nostalgic costume and the dodge ability in the nostalgic level, and the magic focused one in the magic focused story level, this game's combat would have been much better for it. Not to say that I don't enjoy it. I think the level design, boss design, enemy design, and encounter design is spot on for the most part, but again, the polish has cracked long these 13 years. Kingdom Hearts 3, on the other hand, has almost the opposite problem, where the magic is given to you in seemingly random order. For instance, why does the tutorial give you both fire and water? I get water since Darkseid is made mostly out of water, but where does fire come in? I also get that it's a staple of the franchise to give you fire first, then thunder and Olympus, but they kind of threw that out the window in this game by giving you thunder and Toy Box, so I don't get why it gives you 2 at the same time. Regardless, magic is given to you both extremely early and late in the game. To the point, you get Aurora at the end of San Francisco, you know, the last Disney World in the game, and they're given Eroga and Kiraga less than 2 hours later, which is damn near next to each other in the story, effectively making those spells piss until then unless you just spam it. The only one that was given to you in the right place was Arrow at the start of Corona, because you needed to do the dandelion thing for Rapunzel, so it makes sense why you would get it in that world. One thing the game did extremely well was the Keyblade form changes, which are essentially dry forms, command styles from Birth by Sleep, and whatever the fuck wacky ass idea Nomura came up with when he was on that good unicorn kush smashed together, and people lost their minds over them. Even though technically these have been around since 2013 when your favorite sadist was beating with energy balls. However, these things are the single coolest fucking thing the series has ever done in terms of its player-controlled combat. This glorified QuickTime event is still awesome, but there's something rather cathartic about smacking Darkness reincarnate with a giant hammer. Never gets old, y'all. The form changes come in 6 flavors: Flaming Hot Cheetos, Mac and Cheese, Blueberry Twink Tarts, Spearmint Gum, Callback Cheerios, and some White Savior / Edgy Boyfriend protein bars. These form changes, in order, hit you so hard your face collapses, defend you from getting your face collapsed in, shoot sparks from Sora's hair tips, make you go zoom zoom, make you rely on your older brother to take down the baddies because learning new things is hard, and just hit you really hard with particle effects. The form changes not only are more specific parts of the combat that were once taken up by the dry forms, but these also weren't as game-shattering as the previous iterations in some areas. In others, they broke the game in so many ways it's like a mirror being thrown through a wood chipper. Twice. For example, Kingdom Hearts 2's dry forms were basically used as a last resort heal when you were in danger, as a way to effectively nullify all fuck you attacks, because you could just nope out of it with the invincibility frames it gave you, along with the healing stacked on top of that. The form changes have invincibility frames in the animations that you can just turn off and have the thing morph out of nowhere, but regardless if the animations are turned on or off, you don't heal. You're still stuck with whatever health you had when you entered the form change. So you have access to bigger and better attacks, but they also come at a cost that doesn't instantly save your ass in every encounter. Side note, I know I've said this in several videos before, but I also find the form changes more engaging, seeing as you actually see them transform rather than the drive system's flash of white light and then If you've been following me for a while, you know I love visual transformations, and the dry system just didn't scratch that itch. However, this always got me. I noticed something when I was gathering footage, and that came with the Oblivion DLC. See, with this update, they gave you several new abilities that made you hit harder and faster, much like, say, Master or Final Form in KH2. And for no equipment or low-level runs, or even just taking on the data battles, these abilities are fine and serve well to make you feel like a badass. But for the base game, I think they shouldn't have been there. Since day one, everyone has complained that the game is too floaty or that it's not as snappy as Kingdom Hearts 2. Bear in mind that the enemies and bosses are designed around the original combo set so the game remains balanced. However, with these abilities on, say, a standard playthrough of the game, it makes enemies that could potentially give you any kind of challenge fall over like wet cardboard. Now, had these been added to the ability level up system like Magic Galvanizer or Combo Master, then this would be perfectly fine. But no, they're just given to you at the start of a new save file, even if you select you want to play a usual playthrough with the DLC options. I think it just breaks combat since you still have the floatiness that allows you to hit airborne enemies, but now you attack like a goddamn flying ninja. I'm bringing up all of this here rather than in the DLC because while this is DLC content, you get it as part of the 1.10 update with the game, so I figured it was safe to talk about it in the base game's combat option. I don't hate these abilities, in fact I love them, but when I play a casual playthrough of the game, I avoid turning them on so that I don't coast through and I actually have to try. But on Black Code, or even when I do the DLC or God forbid a low-level crit run, you best believe these things are being turned on. The main reason I don't like them is that they take away from the inherent joy of the form changes. The whole reason they're so flashy and are so particle-based is so that we revel in their sheer power. Base Sora's combos are designed to be lackluster compared to everything else because the game is balanced around those other options, and that's what makes them fun. Imagine if base Kingdom Hearts 2 Sora hit as hard and as fast as, say, Final Form, or even just have the same level of combo modifiers as Limit Form. Those forms would cease to be useful because you're already doing the thing those forms excel in. The same thing is happening here. All of the power, none of the time needed to build them up due to the nature of how the gameplay is designed. The form changes are cool because they took setup and are much more thought out than base Sora. That's kind of the point. Now some people, wrong people, say that because the bosses are more susceptible to cheese in this game, that they're worse. And to that I say, Damn near every boss in the series is vulnerable to cheese. It's called magic spamming. Unless it's a huge fuck me big boss in any game before this one, the humanoid bosses are easily exploitable because magic is surprisingly effective since its long range costs basically nothing to use and can be spammed with the MP saving abilities we discussed above. Speaking of magic, the grab magic system or even the situation command system has really pissed people off, and I can understand why. It's random, but it's deliberate randomness. It just isn't as obnoxious as, say, Blizzard Entertainment with their RNG nightmares they call loot boxes. The situation command system is those three triangles you get during combat. When in combat, you have the option for it to either give you a form change or grand magic given your own attacks or inputs. So if you do a lot of magic, you'll get a grand magic. If you do a lot of swinging, you'll get a form change. It is tricky on how you get these to pop up, but they're consistent enough that you're not fucked in combat. It also just adds variety and keeps it interesting. Hell, you can wear cufflinks that just give you the solid level spells you want without needing that RNG, so you can have both more reliably. Switching lanes here, this game really does love its some particle effects. One thing I can honestly say that I was not prepared for was how big or beautiful this game's combat would feel. The attacks, form changes, magic, summons, and finishers are all really beautiful to look at. Which, by the way, if you love spectacle and particle effects, and don't mind the combat getting all up in your face, to play We Are the Champions every time you do a finisher because it was so fucking cool, then I would suggest you go into the menu once more. I'm not kidding when I say critiquing this game has opened me up to so many tiny things that it makes me love it all the more. First off, make sure Keyblade cinematics are turned on, because someone got paid to animate this shit, and it's worth the extra bit of damage, invincibility frames, and love put into them to watch them. And then toggle combo cam on, so that when you perform said combo finisher, you get a flattering camera angle. Did I mention this game's pretty yet? Anyway, the only problem I have with the magic is that, well, it's clearly a priority in this game, and for someone like me who lets good old-fashioned Keyblade swinging, it gets kind of annoying when Thundaga does more damage than a level 8 Hyper Hammer finishing move. I get why though. This is something that you can do for free, and this costs a resource of some kind. But still, a finisher should do a bit bigger of an oomph. There are some more quality of life adjustments I love in this game though regarding magic and the menu navigation on the whole. For one, you're given the option to slow down time when you select magic or an item in your command menu, and I love this because it acts as a secondary pause and lets you think about what you need, or simply allows you to breathe for a moment. The death menu options of retry or prepare and retry is really helpful since you just have to re-enter the fight rather than having to trigger it again. I also cannot state this enough. Using items and being able to block in midair is just so lovely that I can't help but suck the game's dick for it. You go back and play 2 right after this, it is going to take a hot minute to reacclimate to the Dark Ages. If there's ever a remake of KH1 or 2 in the Unreal Engine, these two better come back because they are so good. Even if you don't like the time stop, that's fine, you can opt out of that, but the latter two are things that we can all agree that these are must-stays by any future endeavor by the series. Getting back to the more physical type of combat, I'm not going to go super in-depth about every attraction and every Keyblade. If you want that, go look at all the analysis videos. No, what I want to look at is the Keyblades that I think have a unique idea and are a well-balanced addition to your roster. Oh, did I mention that you can equip 3 Keyblades at the same time and switch between them? Because you can, and my word, it makes things much more satisfying. For instance, if you want, you can have Favorite Deputy, Crystal Snow, and Shooting Star. You start a combo with Deputy, but you remember you have Blizzard Blades saved on Crystal Snow, and the launcher on Shooting Star. So just tap right or left in between hits, and the game will recognize where in the combo you are, and will do the next move in that respective combo's moveset. My only real problem is that you have to hit X and then left or right on the D-pad in between the combo, and sometimes you can mash that shit and it will never change. But if you get the timing right, you can do some amazing stuff. The attractions, however, have a wildly vast scale and quality. My personal favorite is Magic Carousel because it requires not only placement, but timing since it's a rhythm minigame at its core. The better you are with your button prompt, the faster the ride and the glowing rings become and the higher your combo gets. But it requires you to pay attention as to when you should use it in a fight. Whereas the teacups of the water rapid just kinda seem dumb to me. Out of the two of them, I like the teacups more because they allow for more freeform movement and require you to move in an interesting way, as well as find Donald and Goofy to bump them into enemies. The rapids are just make a path of water and then ride it back. It A, takes too long, and B, isn't fun to control. Wee, look at this fun and interactive gameplay. Look at the spectacle. Whoa. I know many people love this ride because it's different every time, and unless you jump constantly, the ride doesn't do a lot of damage to the finisher, which is why most people trigger it and then just spam the finisher. And I know they'll say my favorite is even less fun because it's just a timing minigame, and so is cooking, and outside of that damn egg, y'all seem to enjoy that just fine, so I don't get the problem. Keyblades are a different creature because I like about half of them, even though they borrow concepts from one another. However, I will tell you my top 5, just so my cards are on the table. 5. Shooting Star. It has the same gameplay as the Kingdom Key, but the final finisher is different, so it has a bit of a reuse value that the other Kingdom Key clones don't. 4. Ultimate Weapon. It's a very cool design, though I do think this Fanry color is a lot better. Much more in line with the rest of them, but oh well. 3. Oathkeeper and Oblivion. These things have 2 modes, hit you hard or hit you really hard. 2. Ever After / Crystal Snow. I like Tangled and this Keyblade is so pretty, plus Mirage Staff is stupid broken, whereas Crystal Snow just has fun form changes and a really nice finisher. And number 1 is Favorite Deputy. 2 words, Hyper Hammer. That's it. No other reason. I mean, I like the drill, but the hammer is just the right amount of stupid to control, and I live for it. Alright, now that we have my biases out of the way, let's move on to nitpicking. Keyblades are weird here, since before you would just get a new one and toss the old one, much like toys or friends. How does adulting work? But now you level them up as you get them, and in New Game Plus, you get all of the ones from a prior save, and ooh boy, these prices get steep. I will say that it is nice to start the game out with a level 0 ultimate weapon. It's strangely satisfying to level this thing up from average to just plain unbeatable. Combat on the whole was reworked to accommodate these flashy new attacks and the form changes. That's why, besides 2 of them, all of the Disney World's boss fights are giant monster fights, because they had to be for the fucking hitboxes to matter. I'll touch on this later, but the bosses may not be perfect, but they work pretty well for the environments they're in. The last 2 things I want to talk about are summons and rage form. I saved these till the end because they really highlight the highs and lows of KH3's combat design. Well, those are the Kupo coin. All it is basically this game's version of a Final Fantasy Phoenix Down, which is an item that brings you back from death. I do like how you can only buy and hold 1 at a time though. That's smart as hell, my dude. The limits are just summons from the past games, just renamed for some odd reason. I like the limits. They're all distinct, memorable, and just sitting in chests to be found. One thing KH2 and 1 did was give you summons as part of the story. Well, besides Peter Pan and Stitch, but that's an outlier. Besides Meow Wow at the start of Twilight Town, the other 4 of them are just given to you at random or are just in a chest somewhere. It's a strange change, but I'm not too bent out of shape because they're easy enough to find and are just cool to use. I will say they are mechanically different from the past games because in 1 it costs some MP bars and your party members being alive for some reason to work. And in 2 they use the drive meter, which I guess makes sense. You want to limit the game breaking abilities by having the 2 most damaging ones come from the same place. In 3 they work differently. They kind of act like Cure in that they take all of your MP, but unlike Cure, they need your full MP bar in order to work, rather than say your focus or even just another resource entirely. I get why this is, but it's still confusing. Limits in KH2, also known as team attacks, just cost any MP you had left, so they were still game breaking, but yeah, no, they were just game breaking. I shouldn't be able to decimate a boss and nope out of his DM with a limit on like no magic. So good on you, Square. You logicked yourself into a halfway decent answer. Although this is a thing that could happen with Ralph. That's just awesome though, I don't know what to tell you. If I had to pick my favorite and least favorite, they would be Ariel and Simba. I like Ariel because much like with the carousel, it requires timing to not only get the best score, but also deal the most damage as possible. You get it pretty late in the game, so for it to be somewhat of a heavy hitter that you can activate at will, as well as you have to pay attention to use, I'm cool with it being like this. Simba on the other hand is literally the same as Splash Ride, because you could just clear rooms of enemies by jumping around and spamming the finisher, whereas with Ariel you can't do that because if you do, the damage dealt will be a fraction of what it could be. Simba takes no effort to do damage, and because players are lazy and are ready to lynch anything they don't think is perfect and hold up stuff like this as to why the game is shit. Limits aren't meant to be whipped out every 5 seconds. They're meant to be used for large crowns or maybe a tough boss fight if needed. Rage form is a reworked concept from KH2 called anti-form. When you would use the drive forms, there would be a hidden number to the player that would raise every time you use the drive system. So during the game before you get final form, which lowers this number each time it's activated, you would run the risk of triggering this thing, and more often than not, players wouldn't really work with the form, and thus it became a burden rather than a wacky new tool to use. The only workaround, like I said, was final form, which dropped the number by 10 every time, limit form, which didn't affect the counter at all, and whenever you get a new drive form, which reset the counter to 0. And if you wanted to purposely activate it, you could try using a drive form with 2 become 1, which almost always chucked you into anti-form once final form was unlocked. I like anti-form. I think its combos are fun, I love its design, and I absolutely love how buck wild Sora is in this Sora, you okay? I like the tiny red twink, but I don't understand the tiny red twink. Now that has been completely reworked into a risk mode that can be triggered when you get to critical health. And I love this mode. It has crazy strength, a hella cool combat style, and its finisher after using the wrist charge ability a few times at the cost of half your current health is so nice. Wrist charge is also really cool because it amplifies your attack power, and your combo finisher goes from a random energy surge into a dark tendril attack, and I can't get over it. My favorite part is that aside from the final Xehanort fight, you have complete control over when and how long you use this form. And even if you use wrist charge, it can leave you in a more vulnerable state than when you entered it. Anti-form acted like the dry forms, in that it fully healed you. However, the little cunt would eat your entire dry gauge regardless of how many you had when you activated it or what form you tried to use. So say you had 9 drive bars and you wanted to use wisdom, which takes 3. If you triggered anti-form in it, you just pissed away the other 2/3 of your drive meter. This, I feel, is what led to final form being added with a -10 value, and limit form being given a 0 value, to alleviate that problem and make form leveling take significantly less time, and is the reason things like command styles in Birth by Sleep and form changes in this game took setup rather than a resource bar that everything was funneled through like bells in Animal Crossing. The one negative for Rage form is that you lose whatever form change you're in, so unless you switch Keyblades before hitting it, you lost that setup time, which I suppose is a good risk reward system. The one thing KH2 did over 3 is that whatever dry form you ended a fight with or walked into a room as, the following cutscene would be in that dry form's outfit. KH3 doesn't do that. The only cutscene I can remember doing that is the one where Sora and Woody run on the record player, which I don't get why we can't do that for all the cutscenes. These outfits are really detailed, and seeing every form represented in movie form would make playthrough cutscenes on YouTube be more interesting to watch and add a rainbow of color to them. The only reason I can think as to why this isn't the case is that the game can't load the Keyblade form change outfit and that Keyblade without breaking the game, so they opted not to do it. Or they didn't want to implement it due to the time it would take to do so, and it just wasn't worth the deadline headache. Or they were lazy. I don't know, I'm not a game dev. I will say that they also could have added a bit of emotion to them if you really think about it. For instance, in the Roxas fight in KH2, the only dry form you have access to is Limit Form, which is the color scheme of KH1 Sora. So if you end that fight in this dry form, suddenly this cutscene playing one of the best songs in the game has more meaning to it because it echoes the first scene in the game in which you meet up with Sora as Roxas. Imagine the organization fights if they all could have had those goodbyes with Sora in his KH2 color scheme. That would have hit everything home just a little harder. The sole exceptions to all of this though are Anti and Rage form, which I find is a missed opportunity, seeing as you keep the Keyblade now in Rage form, which wasn't the case in 2. Why can't we see these handsome face in cutscenes, huh? Let me look into Woody's soul with the eyes of the damned, you cowards! Oh god, kill me now. Music is subjective, like one of the most subjective things ever created. But in this series, it's even worse. Because there are so many good tracks in the series, it's hard to have a meaningful discussion when you have this big of a pool to work with. However, I'm gonna go off the beaten path and talk about everything individually so that we can get a sense of how big this game feels. So to start, we have the opening theme. God damn it, couldn't even get through one song before the hot takes started popping out. Face My Fears is one of the most hated songs in the franchise's history, and honestly, I don't get why. I love this song. It not only fits with Sora's character in that he wants to go face the bad guys, but no one will let him, it also doubles as the finale to the Simple and Clean trilogy. Simple and Clean is about a new relationship and how much elation you feel about being around them, to the point that one of them hasn't even met the other's parents yet. Sanctuary is about that relationship much later in life, when the two have become much more codependent and are more in love than before, and Face My Fears is about one of them having a midlife crisis and needs to pursue a dream of theirs, as shown by the hectic and energetic beat breakdowns to show their emotional state while also reinforcing that they still love the other person. And Don't Think Twice reinforces this, as it is very clearly a proposal song and you cannot convince me otherwise. These 4 songs tell a story, a really well thought out story that fits in line with the series and its message of bonds and the heart. The only problem is that I think Sanctuary is the worst out of the 4. I like its chorus, but that's about it, which sucks seeing as it's the opening to one of the best games in the series, and I can't stand it half the time. Simple and Clean is iconic, but is boosted by the Ray of Hope mix because this thing is a fucking bop, and I will have this at my wedding even if it kills me. Don't Think Twice is really pretty, but it's a bit slower than I would have liked, and thus it's saved by a remix which I'll link in the cards and the description. Face My Fears is just the best on its own to me because it's something that I can listen to and not get sick of. It has a very nice flow to it and those bass drops really do add a level of emotion to the whole thing that I didn't think I'd love as much as I did, but it now sits near the top of my favorite songs of all time. Also, can we just stop and appreciate this game's dearly beloved? I cry every time I hear this. It's slow build up, it's break with the waves, those piccolos, and ugh, God, I could go on. But suffice to say that this is my favorite version of the song by far. Alright, with that all said and done and my comments thoroughly on fire, let's get on to the world-specific tracks. When it comes to the past games, the world-specific tracks are a thing of beauty, and here is no different. The best thing this game does for its music is that it matches the characters and the world emotion it's going for. Some bops bops are boppier than other bops bops, but I feel like that's common with every game. But before we look at those individually, we need to take a step back and look at how the franchise has shown emotion through its musical selections. In Kingdom Hearts 1, the world music is very simple, but straightforward. For example, in Traverse Town, the idea is that this is a safe place. Seeing as this is the hub world, it makes sense as to why these would be the feels they were trying to invoke. And that's reinforced more so in KH2 when it comes to Twilight Town, where the theme is literally called Lazy Afternoon. It makes the whole thing seem more relaxed, even though you're playing through the end of this poor boy's life. And don't worry, we'll get to Roxas's theme near the end of the game. I'm using these two worlds as a way to explain my point that the music in the series is more than an ever-changing background cue for when something is or isn't happening, and the music is designed to make you feel something. That's the point. And no other world in the game exemplifies this better than Olympus. Its music is, well, there's no other word for it. Huge. The field theme is just an orgasm of the orchestra with this wonderful break in the music where the choir comes into play, and it's just beautifully done. It really does speak to the size and scale of this world. While I will touch on that more so in the level design section, I have to say this world is huge, both in depth and height. And even if you're running through it without killing Heartless, this sense of size is always reinforced by this orchestra going the hammiest ham that ever hammed a Mark Hamill performance. Oh wait, he's just a cameo in this, but you get what I mean. I also love the way this world's theme has this crescendo and just lovely breaks so that you can admire the world rather than just a constant go, go, go feeling that a lot of the other games go for. The battle theme also tells you what this world is going for. Big, bold, bombastic, and overall just larger than life. And, well, heroic. This is a far cry from KH2, where the two themes just seem really similar and kinda dour, which I know was the point because you are in hell, but still, I think it could have been more, I guess is a good way to say it. The Realm of the Gods also has its own themes as well. Yes, they are just revamped versions of the field and battle themes of KH1's Olympus Coliseum, but hey, it's a nice nod to past games that is well warranted and actually mentioned in-game, and damn it, all of it didn't make me grin the first time I saw it. Twilight Town is another reused world that is phenomenal in its use of music. The field theme, titled Afternoon Streets, is, I think, better in this game because it doesn't sound as sharp on the ears. The little strikes on the xylophone aren't quite as pronounced in the remake, which to me makes them feel more impactful, seeing as they aren't giving you tinnitus whenever you hear them. The tune overall just seems to have better sound mixing, seeing as I can hear everything, and it feels like it leads into each note more organically than it did in the original track. This leads into how densely packed Twilight Town is, and how it's supposed to feel like a laid-back town festival. It's so simple, but it's so effective. Funny enough, I like this version of working together for the opposite reason. Before the bombastic nature of this song kicks in, there's a lull in the song that allows you to ramp up to combat that other worlds don't quite do. In 2, since the track is so loud as is, both in its chorus and its opening, it left you wanting more. Not saying the song isn't a bop, it really is, but I'm making a point here. That being, the contrast stands out more in 3 when we can hear the difference. I know it sounds weird to go in such depth about 2 tracks that are just repeats of the most iconic game of the franchise, but I'm going in so much depth because, like it or not, music colors your thoughts on a level more so than you would think. A quick example before we move on is Sonic Generation's City Escape. The tune has a classic and modern remake, and while I prefer the modern stage, I hate its remake of the song. Something about it just doesn't feel right. However, the classic remake is just so good, and it feels like it fits that game's whole time gimmick, because it's a happy middle ground between the Genesis and GameCube era of music design. They sound similar, but they're still distinct from one another. Moving on to the first Disney World, Toy Box, we have yet another comparison to KH1, and that comes in the half-fish, half-jailbait form of Atlantica. Something that the first game struggled with was that while its music was really fitting, it wasn't always the catchiest. Atlantica is my biggest example of this, because while I love the break and monotony that is KH1's combat, it also has the most annoying loop of a field track I've ever heard in my life. Yes, I know it's the instrumental of Under the Sea, but the drums just get annoying after a while. Had the game gone with the approach they did for KH2 and made an actual theme, it would have made the level so much better. Its battle theme is catchy as all fuck, and I can't tell if it's because I like the theme, or if it's because it breaks up the bullshit that is... Toy Box has the same problem, only I actively like the battle theme and know why. The battle theme feels like, well, playtime. It has this bombastic, energetic feel that comes with playing. It also harkens back to the Buzz Lightyear theme at the start of Toy Story 2, without straight up ripping it off. Another world in the series that pulls off this duality correctly is Castle of Dreams from Birth by Sleep, in that the field theme is bippity boppity boo, but rather than making it a one-to-one remake, they gave it a much more laid-back feel and a lower register than the OG song, so that it sticks in your mind and gives the vibe of a chilled-out place to be in. The battle theme is more in line with Toy Box, as it is such a stark contrast to how the field theme plays, the reason being that this is such a normal world, and the fact that there are monsters trying to kill a girl, who frankly should look into some therapy once the honeymoon's over, makes perfect sense to me. When it comes to the Toy Box battle theme, I also really like how it breaks in the middle to allow you to kind of get your bearings. It's got some jazz in there too, and damn it, all of it doesn't make this world stand out. Its field theme is just the same, like, 40-second loop of You Got a Friend in Me, and my god, I wanted to die. I know there's more to the song, but good god, it sounds so similar that it nearly broke me. Now, I get that you had to have this song here. Much like with Halloween Town and This Is Halloween, if it wasn't there, it would have just felt odd. But did you have to make it sound so whimsical? Like, they're looking for missing toys here, man. Can we get some gravity for the situation? Like, the tune is fine, but maybe a lower pitch could have made this sound a lot better. Just, this tune gets repetitive after a while. Corona is... well, perfect. The field theme, battle theme, and level design are centered around Rapunzel, as it should be. She's perfect and wonderful and so fucking sweet and pure. And no, really guys, I mean get a little of all that hair. The field theme is meant to invoke this sort of curiosity in you and this laid-back tone to make you want to explore and take your time in the woods, both in a relaxed sense and in a giddy, excited sense, kinda like Rapunzel. Whereas the battle theme is something else. And I mean that in the best possible way. It has this very rhythmic way of almost pulling you in with its energy. The idea is that Rapunzel is very bubbly and bouncy and wants to achieve her goal, and the music is right up that alley. It has an upbeat tempo, a go, stop, and start to it that allows you to take a breather and get your bearings, and then come back in knocking bitches out with a frying pan. It's awesome. The end of the melody has this nice peter off with the flutes fading out, almost like it's ready for the field theme again. But then it goes right back into the main melody because that's how Rapunzel be. And honest to God, that's what sets this one apart from the rest. While every other world theme and most boss themes are tailored to invoke the movie they're in, these two have to invoke the character we're playing with, and that makes all the difference. Yes, there are some boss themes that break away from the pack, but we'll get to those in a minute. The Marsh, this tiny area that you're only in for like 3 minutes, that doesn't even have that many secrets in it, has a theme that is wholly unique to it that you only hear if you're willing to stop and take it in. I don't know about you, but to me, that screams charm and effort. Speaking of screaming, Monstropolis is a factory. Like, not even the outside of the front door. No, this bitch starts you in the lobby like, "Hello, did you have an appointment with Mr. Sullivan? No? Well then eat shit! But I don't mind that. I think having a more confined indoor level works to break up the pace. Again, I'll touch on this later, but this world, for all of its faults, has its place in the game. Its music is something that I don't think people care for. Much like with Toy Box or Atlantica or even Arendelle, people like one over the other. I, however, think both work to this place's advantage. Think about this. What is the level design telling you through nothing else but its aesthetic? For me, this place screams, giant, cold, hard, lifeless factory. And the darker, more steel mill worker track works to accommodate this sense of dread. Now, the people that are running this place aren't like that anymore, but you can't just overhaul the factory's foundation. So yeah, it's gonna be depressing. Along with that, the story of the world tells you outright what Randall and Phineas are trying to do: produce screams again. So this music lets you feel that dread firsthand. But the battle theme though? Bruh. Come on, this thing is so fucking catchy and triumphant, and like you just learned what sex was after a 10-year dry spell. The theme is meant to show how laughter and happiness and joy can overcome fear that comes with monsters or general fear, which is a masterful lesson to teach people. Plus it turns the whole scary on the outside and friendly on the inside thing on its head. Because, well, look at Mike and Sully. They're monsters, but they play with a 2-year-old like they just brought her home from the orphanage. It's so pure. As I said with Corona, level and character theming are important with the music, and while I think Corona is stronger due to it having 2 tracks I love, I can't fault this place for its theming. Again, appropriate over catchy every time, my dudes. The 100 Acre Woods is nothing special. It's just a livelier version of Silly Old Bear, which isn't bad, I just don't have much to say on it. It picks up the tempo a bit and makes the world feel like home, since nothing's changed besides the aesthetics. The minigame theme will be covered in the minigames section, so don't worry on that. Without further ado, we press on. Next up we have... Arendelle. This level has been lambasted to hell and back, and I will add to it more so later on, but for now, I need to look at the music. And strangely enough, kinda like Corona, this place has 2 sets of tracks to talk about. One for the mountain, and one for the ice labyrinth. I'm gonna start with the labyrinth because its themes are easier to talk about. They're good. Not great, but good. I think they're appropriately menacing, but that's really it. The field theme is meant to make you feel trapped and hopeless, and the battle theme is meant to make you feel like you're fighting an insurmountable force. I mean, you're not, but it's nice the game tried to make you think that. Moving on from a dark sky blue color scheme to a light sky blue color scheme. The battle theme is, again, good, but I can't tell what they're going for. On the one hand, it feels like they're trying to be uplifting and hopeful in the face of danger, but at the same time, it's trying to impart the danger of what you're doing, and it comes off as that kid in band class who just wanted to go ham on the drums whenever he was put on them, even though it didn't make sense. The field theme though, not gonna lie, this is probably one of the best field themes in the series, and if you know how I feel about this level, then that's extremely high praise on top of an outrageous claim. When I hear this tune, I think winter, I think Christmas, I think just snowtime fun. This tune starts out soft, and then kicks in again with a jump in the song, and then after a few seconds, it jumps again into a more bombastic part of it, and it has constant sleigh bells as the underlying beat, and it's just so fun to listen to. It even has a lull in the song, so that you get this sense of slowing down and admiring the mountaintops and all the little nooks and crannies of this place as you walk up what is the blandest level in the game. And now, somehow, we've gone from the dead of winter to the sweltering heat of a pirate's life at sea, also known as solid water traversal to melted ice traversal. Pirates, much like Olympus, has not only to compete with the past game it was in, but also has several field themes to make it stand out from the rest, rather than just having the one. If we wind back to KH2 Port Royale, Royale? I don't know, I'm just gonna pronounce it Royale because it sounds better to me. Don't at me. If we go back to that, we have just some truly terrible tone clashing and art design decisions that are just giving me whiplash looking at them, but also a very melancholy theme. When I think of Port Royale in KH2, I think of damp skies and just sad. Which, yeah, the thing takes place at night to accommodate the pirates curse thing, but the theme just doesn't scream pirates to me. It feels kind of like you're in a poor town rather than the main town that's associated with this franchise. The battle theme is, of course, the film's score, which is excellent and fits what they're going for. However, I think if the theme had been a bit more uplifting, it would have made things feel more connected. It just made Port Royale seem disappointing as a result. Welp, 15 years later, a real music budget and some fucking coffee fixed that shit right up. Where to begin? I mean, good God, these themes are like night and day. Literally. The field theme of Port Royale is jaunty, carefree, and overall something that feels like a seafaring town. They embrace it, love it, and make their lives by it. The town in general is bustling as well, which adds to this sense of camaraderie and joy that this tune provokes. The island field theme is very much the same. The feel of this theme is more of an epic adventure. The way the music breaks and sways in on itself like a wave breaking on the rocks of a bay is just a beautiful way to complement the level you're in. It has more to it, but the fact I can hear the waves in the song and it not actually be waves like in Dearly Beloved is amazing, and I love it. Which, as I said before, is great because it allows you to not only understand when combat is happening, while also fitting within the context of the films it's from. It's also just nice because it isn't the movie's theme all over again like it was the first time. Speaking of which, the sailing theme is much like the field theme in that it makes you feel like a little kid that got to sail their very own pirate ship and go see the seas. Say that 5 times fast. And that ties into Sora, because, well, that's what's happening. See, unlike KH2, where you were teleported from island to island while being broken up with you fighting Heartless and nobody's on the boat, you now sail from island to island and fight Heartless while on the ship. It's a small distinction, but it makes all the difference. And the fact that you get a land traversal and a sea traversal tune is so helpful in this massive exploration-centered world because it breaks up the monotony of hearing the same song over and over and over again in favor of having two similarly designed and yet so different execution songs. San Francisco is average. Not to say that it's bad, I just find its music to be a bit bland and lacking a lot of the flavor that other themes have. The field theme is appropriately chilled out, but it doesn't really fit the movie it's based on. I know this flies in the face of how I praise Pirates for not going with the movie's theme, however, I think here an instrumental remix of Immortals, or even an acoustic version would have made it stand out. It's nice, but I feel like I'm at the wrap-up show for the real stars. Again, I can't be too mad, I just don't think this is the best the game could have gone for. The battle theme has the opposite problem, in where I get where they were trying for, and I think it fits this world just fine, it's just murder on my ears at the start. It does get your blood pumping for combat, but I don't know, I've just never been a big fan of techno. So while it fits, I'm not mad at it if that makes any kind of sense. Now that the worlds are done, let's move on to how the bosses are handled, and then the last few worlds because they have their own unique themes. Boss themes in the series have a weird track record. Some of them have unique themes that don't appear anywhere else, and for most other bosses, and many bosses, they would share themes and it would get a little old after a while. Birth by Sleep had a weird set of circumstances because it had the most story-focused battles in the franchise with their own themes. KH2 did this with the big guys, but other bosses didn't seem to get that level of care, and here kind of follows suit. All of the Disney bosses get a generic, albeit fitting, boss theme that may be used once or twice in the game, but really it's just so that they stand out from the generic Heartless. The Titan theme springs to mind because they already had the damn thing written, they just had to epicify it a little bit, and boom, you're done. I think if I'm remembering correctly, the bosses would get specific themes, and then maybe like Davy Jones and Baymax would get their own, because those are more humanoid and thus have more personality than a generic monster. And that's all well and good, but once we hit the Keyblade Graveyard, the Final World, and Scala, they have alright themes, but nothing that matches what came before or after. The Keyblade Graveyard is just a more epic remaster of its theme, which I like better seeing as the chords are more balanced since they were made for this generation of consoles rather than the fucking PSP. I will never get over that. And its battle theme? Well, it doesn't really have one. It has several that are used because this is a place that was made for set pieces rather than a world on its own, which isn't a bad thing, I'm just telling it like it is. The Final World, though, has a beautiful theme that really does feel like the final destination for those who have lost their hearts. The way the flute plays is just so beautiful, and the tones when you're collecting your animations is so good. Scala has this very, this is where it ends feel, like it's going to have to live up to the hype of this moment. And while I think it does that, it also sounds kinda menacing too, like it knows what's going to happen and it's not gonna fuck around. If you're wondering why I'm skipping over the music here, but spent 10 minutes on the rest of the music, well, it comes down to the fact that this stuff doesn't matter. These 3 worlds are pit stops to the finale. The other 9 worlds are the other 90% of the game, and needed to be treated as such. We care about the Disney worlds and want to see them done right. It just so happens that the music in the end game flexes more so in the boss fights, more so than the actual base level theme. The organization boss fights have masterful music, like all of them have at least one theme that stands out. The 13th Dilemma, as it's known, has a revamp that makes me nut. Like seriously, the way they remade this theme is so subtle, but it works on a big level. Before, the theme was met with some semblance of importance, but it was still common since there were like 8 of these fights in the game proper, and 5 extra if you did all the absent silhouettes. The Redux theme is just the same base melody, but with more drums and chorus backing it, and damn it if it doesn't make these fights feel more impactful. And the fact that there are only 5 of them this time, and only half of those get their own theme, it stands to reason, this time around, it doesn't get too repetitive since you hear it less, and therefore, it holds more weight. Vanitas gets a more sinister version of his theme. It's more in the background than before, and I think it fits him much better than before, because he's more intimidating and now has to face his light counterpart, and I'll be damned if that theme doesn't fit him. This version of Rage Awaken, which is originally the Lingering Wills theme, which is now used as the Terra Norton Vanitas theme, is loud, overbearing, and feels a tad creepy with the Castle Oblivion organ at the start. A fitting theme for the 2 oldest villains in the series. Technically. The triple Xehanort fight as the penultimate battle is so beautifully chaotic. The OG, the redo, and the classic boy all mixing and mashing and clashing in such a way that makes this fight, more so than any other in the final chapters, the beauty of this series in its own messy way. The final Xehanort theme has this slow, deliberate underlying beat that are meant to make you take your time. Or maybe this is his POV and he's trying to see how best to beat you because he's seen you beat his best soldiers, heard your legend, and knows your strength. So he's not one to just bolt in like crazy. Hell, he didn't even do that with Terra until he had his body. And then he strikes when the time is right, and this is a final boss theme that gets it because it aligns with how big the boss's attacks feel and how weirdly satisfying it is to get your teeth knocked in by this man. It even works in a bit of his old theme to harken back to where all of this began. And with that, I think I've covered music. We've talked about every track in every world. Well, besides the minigames, but there's a whole section on that. Overall, the music fits really well for what each track is meant to do. Yes, some suck and some are fucking amazing, but that's true of how music works in every video game. It doesn't make them any less relevant, it just means the bad ones are not as great as the truly good tracks that deserve to be cared about. Since I listed above why I did the music in such detail, I don't think I need to bore you with it again. So let's move on to enemy design.
Made you look.
Are you fucking kidding me? Did you think I forgot about the god tier theme that is Vector to the Heavens and the Other Promises remix? Which I will now and henceforth be referring to it as Vector to the Other Promise. Because goddamn, that title is awesome and no one has coined it yet. So for you normies, I gotta explain some shit. So strap the fuck in, cause this one's a doozy. Vector to the Heavens comes from the end of the midquel 358 Days Over 2 when you have to fight Xion. Don't ask why, it takes too long to explain. The point of this theme is that the fight is between 2 friends, and the frantic nature of this thing along with how damn dramatic it feels makes it worth playing the headache of this game. Hell, this fight is so iconic, they up and patched a cutscene into the HD port just to have this theme in the collection because fans loved it so much. Say what you will about Square, but they give a fuck about their fans. The Other Promise has a lot more context behind it, and a lot more tears attached to it. Oh god, this thing gets me every time. So this song has a variation called Roxas that plays at the start of Kingdom Hearts 2 when he merges with Sora. It's meant to be a juxtaposition to Sora's theme, which is bombastic and loud and fun, much like Sora himself. The Other Promise comes from a fight in the final level of Kingdom Hearts 2, and on the whole is a more emotional creature that fucking makes my heart break. And seeing this cutscene brings a lot of emotions out of me. And damn it, I just want him to be happy. Along with all of those factors, there's one more thing that tips this Jenga tower like a toddler. See, Sayax has been a dick to everyone in this fight. Well, except Kairi, but she gets spirited away anyway, so fuck her. With Axel being betrayed by him, Roxas being used by him, Xion almost abused by him due to his callousness, and the fact he made Sora cry to get on his knees and beg for his red-dyed piece of cardboard, and then to tell him no? This fight has a lot of weight behind it. So imagine all of that setup, and then you hear this god tier of a song start as you begin to kick this man's teeth in. It's glorious. That opening is perfect, that bass is perfect, the way the two collide into one another is perfect. This song is perfection in MP3, and I could and have listened to it for hours. It's harsh, it's quick, it's slow, it's beautiful, it has a rhythm, it meanders, it makes you cry and then more crying and then even more crying and you still have more tears and then finally you break with it. And with that, Sayax goes down. Vector to the Other Promise is amazingly well done and heart-wrenching while also being catchy. I don't need to explain how this song works in its theme or its ballad because this song speaks for itself. And if you don't understand why after the background was given to you or just listening to it, then you don't know good music. So with that magnum opus behind us, let's talk about boss design. Bosses in the series have an interesting track record. Some are mechanically satisfying and require you to pay attention to the fight around you in order to succeed, and some are pattern heavy bullshit that punishes you for trying to even think about comboing him or even attack at all outside the allotted 8 picoseconds you have after you dodge roll. Others fall in the middle, where they're decent and have a reliable way to deal with them, whereas others are spam heavy for no reason and require you to just cheese them or grind past them to deal with their bullshit. What I'm getting at here is the bosses in this series have a wide range in quality, and most people are jumping onto the bandwagon of it's floaty and too many big monster fights in this game rather than looking at the fights mechanically. While, yes, the big monster fights are a bit too many for me, they don't bother me because, well, look at the size of the arena we have to fight in this game versus, say, any room in KH1 or 2. I'd say the biggest room in KH1 off the top of my head that isn't Chernobog is Monster's Mouth. And even then, that's about half the size of the courtyard of Land of Dragons in KH2. The monster bosses in 3 are designed with the scale in mind. This is why even with the Data Ore fights in 2, they had relatively small areas. The biggest is Zaldan's, and that's because he was a main storyline boss, so they had to reuse it here, otherwise it wouldn't have worked at all. So let's look at what makes the bosses in KH3 stand out in the way from the rest of the series' giant monster fights. But first, let's take a step back and define what I mean when I say a giant monster fight, since the series is known at this point for big scripted heartless fights, but there is a difference between the two, especially with the golems that pop up in a few areas in scripted fights. A good example of giant monster fights that matter in the story are the Twilight Thorn and Jafar from Agrabah in KH2. The Nobody Dragon in the middle of the final boss gauntlet doesn't count to me because it just kind of breaks up the keyblade swinging of it all because it looks cool. It's an encounter, not a boss fight. The golems, Bug Unversed, and all but the final demon tower are encounters, not boss fights. So now that we have my stance laid out, let's look at the bosses here. Something that I noticed while replaying that the game does for every world is what I like to call story segmented bosses. And what I mean by that is that there are 2 actual bosses in the story of each world. Olympus can help me out here since it makes the most sense in what I mean. Before you get to the realm of the gods, you get to fight the Rock Titan. The reason for this is because of the way the game treats the summit of the mountain like it's a new world on its own. Following that, you have some heartless encounters, but the real attraction, lol attraction, here is the other 3 titans. Anyway, the Rock Titan is a marked improvement from KH1. At least the boss does some damage that makes me care about what's actually happening, given the fact that we don't have Cure yet, and those stomps do pose a threat now since you're in an enclosed area rather than the whole Colosseum like in KH1. It makes sense, and I'm actually happy this poor guy got one boss fight that requires you to pay attention. The other 3 are good. I think it's interesting that the first phase is mainly the Ice and Lava Titans, with the Tornado Titan hanging out in the background, knocking you back occasionally like a little bitch, and the second phase is the reverse, where the Tornado Titan is front and center, and now the unconscious Ice and Lava Titans are used as elemental projectiles so as to make them more than just dead. And because the Spin Bag just isn't that threatening on its own if you have like 2 potions. I like these fights. They aren't super difficult, but they are good representations of what you'll be fighting later on. One thing I would change is, rather than the Rock Golem as your attraction introduction, it's instead the Cyclops. This would make the destruction around the city make more sense, and I don't know, just be a nice bookend to this world since this guy is really all that is left from the movie that can be used as a driving conflict. I mean, yes, we have all the other gods on the TV show to work with, but still, in terms of a fight, we need something, and my optic friend is the best way to do it. So Toybox has a problem with its bosses. Not Angelic Amber, but the 2 UFOs. Amber is a good boss because she has a lot of mobility, mainly stays to the right side of the store, which has a lot of cover for you, and her moves are strangely jerky so as to mess with your timing, which I don't mind here as I normally do with other bosses, seeing as they're typically far enough away or have one tail that can be avoided with properly jumpy guard timing. I will admit though that this chick is creepy as hell and is basically as close as this series will ever get to just straight up horror. I love her. The first UFO was both a blessing and a curse because it's trying to teach you how the King of Toys is going to work, only without the shot steps since this room is so small and you've got mechs. However, it moves incredibly fast, teleports, and again, there are fucking mechs to fuck your progress. I'd talk about King of Toys himself, but really he's just a floating UFO, like the last one, that just has rockets, a tornado attack, and a tiny hitbox. It's decent, but I think it's mitigated by the first UFO just being the same thing, only boring. I think if the game had used the King of Toys instead of the small guy as the alien's kidnapping boss, and maybe used Buzz as a boss like the game is hinting at, it would have made things a little more interesting. Buzz's attacks do a lot more damage, and maybe adding in the karate attack as a joke, and overall just be a more interesting fight because of how he and Woody have grown since the first movie. I liked Toybox's bosses, but I feel like they could have been better seeing as they had some potential to work with. Although, gotta say, King of Toys, one of the better names in the series, and I fucking love his playroom. I mean, just look at this place, it's so quiet and peaceful, and oh god! Corona has a similar thing. The first boss fight in the world, that weird carriage thing, is actually engaging given the space you fight him in and how much damage it deals. Its attacks are nothing to write home about. Its weird obsession with stepping on you is just odd, but is an overall fitting boss fight for this world. The Grim Guardianess, I want to punch in her tree boob because this fight sucks. Now, I get why this boss is so big, I get why her attacks are so blockable, and I get why this fight is in this big of an arena. However, this fight spits in the face of what could have been, and I'll tell you why. So, you're stuck in the tower's clearing, you can't go anywhere, and if you already explored earlier, you know the layout pretty well. Also, fun fact, the chest in this area has that stupid mask clasp that lets you be immune to her pollen attack. That's smart design, not gonna lie. So this place just isn't a mystery in terms of its layout, but they made a boss that is so hard to miss that I'm 90% sure you can beat her without trying. In fact, I did that by accident. This fight could have been what I call the witch. See, Gothel's cloak is what gets turned into the tree, which also makes no fucking sense anyway, seeing as a tree has nothing to do with this movie or world besides the fact that you're in a forest. So have the cloak take on like a human-like shape, like it was still being worn, and from inside the thing there's this shadow of Gothel still clinging to her life and shooting purple projectiles in this massive arena. That would have been amazing. You could keep in the mechanic of her spawning those cages and apple bombing you while she's on the tower's points and she has plenty of apples because she's an asshole. Make it keep in character or maybe do something for the fight. Instead of Rapunzel cutting her hair and that triggers her rapid graying, we instead have Eugene healed and tied up, and Rapunzel struggling in her chains causes Pascal to, again, knock this bitch out a window so that she still dies from this, but now has a reason to go back to the top of the tower. With this rework, Gothel would trap you, go to the window, grab her hair, and go to the top of the tower and start singing in a distorted, old-sounding voice the Song of Healing. And the longer she sings, the more the hair heals her. I normally like to praise stuff for what I think it does well, but in this case, I can't get behind this fight. I like it for what it is, that being an interestingly designed monster with a sneezing potential, but damn it man, they dropped the ball here, and it's one of the few things I'll say this game got wrong. This fight though, my fight, makes 10 times more sense than this tree, and honestly would have made for one of the best fights in the series. But we couldn't do that because, well, because of the endgame. But I'll elaborate on that later. Anyway, moving on to, weirdly, the most out there boss set. The Lump of Horror is mainly hyped in Monstropolis, which is fine. The fight is at least somewhat interesting. The thing that hinders this world is that it breaks the pattern, in that it only has a final boss and like 2 or 3 swarms of Unversed, and that I don't quite get. I mean, if the first stage boss was Randall in the main computer room after he tries and fails to wake the lump, with him turning invisible and you needing to find him by hearing him laugh or taunt you would be really cool. And his defeat after would then spark the negative emotions to awaken the Lump of Horror would have been great, would have tied into the whole theme of the story of the world. But for some reason, we just taunt him and he leaves to go mess with the lump. Speaking of whom, I think the idea is solid. When it's in blob mode, it's tanky and very mobile, which is a rare combo, and I think works overall. And when it's in what I'm calling the totem mode, it takes a shit ton of damage and doesn't move, but it has the rest of its body become goopy hands that beat you until you're covered with goo, which is my typical Saturday night with my boyfriends, while also using its bat wings to push you back like the Tornado Titan, only more frequently. Now, can you spot the problem? If you answered its vulnerable stage has too many obstacles to deal with, you are correct. Now, I think that it having one or the other would be fine, but having the wings and the hands is just not okay, seeing as it makes you wait or deal with the hands until it goes back into the blob form, and by God, does it get annoying after a while. I mean, you get Splash Run in this fight, so maybe it's trying to make you use that. But as I've covered, it's fucking shit, mate. I get what this boss is trying to do, but I think it could have been better. I feel like I need to say that I enjoyed these bosses, but I need to explain where the monster fights fail here, so that later I can explain what about them is great all at once. Moving on to Arendelle, we have Marshmallow, which I think is a good game transition of a movie fight, which the series has always been good at. It even has a baby reaction command, with you and Goofy pulling a tree like in the movie. This fight teaches you Marshmallow's attacks, so that when he's a party member for all of like 30 seconds, you know what you're in for. Plus, I think it's cute that when you burn him with fire, he jumps around and grabs his ass, and it's just kind of funny. Skull is the coolest boss conceptually in the game. It is mitigated by the world story, but we'll get there, I promise. In any case, this feels like what the Lump of Horror should have been. It's mobile, it's tanky, summons in small babies to fight with him, while also having a timed gimmick with the Dark Ball. It's not really a problem or anything, seeing as there isn't anything that makes you stop attacking other than Skull's finisher. But again, that's not really a problem to me, since it's a finisher. If Arendelle did one thing right, it was these two fights because they're appropriate for the world and cool enough to not make me go, why is this happening this way? Pirates is interesting because it has 4 bosses. One is used so that flow motion has a reason to be part of this world's combat. One is used to justify the underwater combat, which I like but didn't bring up before because it's not all that deep. Deep. You mash X, hold circle to move faster, and use your magic other than water, because, well, duh, as projectile AoE magic. I love it, but again, it's not all that complex. The next boss is a race with Luxord, and then the actual boss boat battle bopping bombastically with Boppin Bobs, and then an on-the-rail shooter, and finally, we have our first humanoid boss in the game. The Burb, while a fun concept, is a bit like Spellikin from Dream Drop Distance, in where it's constantly moving, and when you catch up to it, it basically does nothing until it hits its revenge value and knocks you off to keep doing the same shit as before. I will say the fact that you can ride the little bat Heartless is fun, funny, and overall just adorable. It's also a nice change of pace that you're in the air for most of this fight, and are meant to be by virtue of the boss's design, rather than how floaty the combat can be. The underwater anglerfish is, again, a test of how well you can use your underwater combat, and is also foreshadowing the armored Xehanort fight later, as well as giving you the aerial summon, which is the best summon, and I'll fight you on that. The race is meant to teach you how hordes of Heartless work as boats, and to give you a taste of how, for lack of a better term, boss ships work in the open world. The Luxord boat fight is to show that he's a dick. The on-the-rail shooter is just a nice way to incorporate the Kraken into the game without just bashing its face in. And finally, we come to old Squidface himself, Davy Jones. His boss fight is the first of its kind, and yet it still kept the tradition since he's literally, well, let him tell you.
I'm a harmless rat chop.
I just think that's funny how they made a Heartless fight and still kept the character intact. This fight is a sword fight with Jack in tow, and it's great. He teleports, summons Kraken tentacles, and just has a lot of moves that makes things more chaotic than if you just made the Kraken the final boss. Overall, Pirates had really good fights that actually make you pay attention to the fight at hand and are really well rounded for what they're trying to get done. So yeah, good boss fights. But with every high, there is a dividend, and that's San Francisco's bosses. With San Fran, it has one okay boss, one really boring boss, and one truly awful fight that makes you wonder why anyone thought this would be fun. But okay, let's look at the first of these. This weird, tri-brained dinosaur is the best boss in this world, and that's because it requires you to pay any kind of attention. It has hard-coded phase transitions that demand you change your target and spellcasting, as well as changing your combos from air to ground, since you stand on its back to hit the damn thing. And finally, it goes from the ground to the top of a skyscraper, which isn't mechanically complex, but hey, it's something. The next boss is just boring because the damn thing is cubes that shoot smaller cube clusters at you and turns into a hand to hit you. I mean, the first phase where you can't damage it makes sense, but the actual fight should have been an evolution of the first phase by having you fight data versions of the 4 of you. First a cast-happy Donald, then a tanky Goofy, a damage-heavy Baymax, and then a tits-ass-hard Data Sora fight where he throws everything possible at you. It could be a giant, or it could be actual-sized version of you guys. That makes way more sense for the data cubes that have studied your movements. Or hell, it could have been that Riku made them like this because he's seen you fight the whole level. Just anything would have been better than this boring ass thing. And then, the thing that made me want to die every time I played this game, Dark Baymax. 4 words, on rails, flying shooter. I like this when it was a side mission that you could do once per world, and you know, was a spectacle to see, but here, there really is no other way to say this. I want this bitch to die a painful death. All you do is shoot at Dark Baymax, heal randomly, and then when the game tells you, you're basically just doing your team attack till the boss is dead. None of the flair or even the freedom to change things up in this fight. This fight plays out the exact same way every single time, and it's bullshit. Frankly, it is the worst way to end the Disney World, because it lacks any flavor, any charm, any identity as a fight. It's just shoot and punch, and that might be fine for Call of Duty, but this is Kingdom Hearts, and I expect more from this franchise. After that, we have another peak, and that's the Aqua, Solo Vanitas, and the Organization fights. The Aqua fight is the same as it was in 0.2, which isn't bad at all. I like that we got to experience it as a super hard boss in 0.2, and now it's a storyline boss we can destroy as revenge by sheer contrast of how easy it is in comparison. Vanitas is the same as in Birth by Sleep. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And man, is it satisfying to have Water Lesbian beat Edgy Gimp's ass. Before the Organization, we have the Demon Tide again, which, while mechanically simple, is still satisfying to kill because of how annoying it's been. It has 2 modes, Red-Eyed Demon mode, and Yellow-Eyed Bend Over Give It To Me Daddy mode. Again, not all that complex, but still a decently made encounter. I think I'm going to skip the Lynch because it functions much like those red coat Heartless. It has a huge health bar, has weird attack, and it's fought more than once, so it kinda loses its luster. If it were one big fight that teleported to different worlds without us having to chase it with a massive health bar, it would have been really cool. As it stands, the fight is just kill, avoid status effects, kill some Heartless, go through a portal, kill, rinse and repeat. The org fights, on the other hand, are interesting because of the setups. They all play the same way as they did in their original fights, or their KH2 remakes, and I love them. The Luxord, Marluxia, and Larxene combo is an interesting one because these three don't really interact much, outside of Chain of Memories, or at all for that matter, but work well mechanically. Luxord is a ranged attacker, which struck me since in KH2 he was closer and more mid-range due to the fact that he drew the cards back when he threw them out, kinda like Scorpion's pull chain. Marluxia has his scythe that keeps him relatively close to you, and Larxene has her lightning, but also just wants to get up and kiss you with her electric knuckles. It's just fun, I can't lie. The Data Riku and Xigbar fight feels appropriately badass, seeing as it sets up the epilogue and is a nice bookend to Riku's character arc. Plus how this fight ends is just so funny to describe to non-fans for how little it makes sense out of context. So Riku beats Riku, Riku flies out of Riku's body and pulls Riku out of his body and leaves a blank replica in its place, so Riku tells Riku that he and Riku are going to Riku Heaven. See, that's just a fun time. Mechanically, it's satisfying because Dark Riku is close range like in KH1, and Xigbar is Xigbar. He teleports and stunlocks you forever, but still, decently fun encounter. So remember like 12 years ago when I brought up the Xion fight from 358 Days and how beloved it is for the emotions it causes even though she turns into a Heartless? Well, now I can say that had that been an actual Keyblade wielder fight, then this fight would have mattered less. See, the start of this fight with Xion and Sayax is interesting because if you let Kairi and Axel do their own thing and you stay out of the fight for a minute, you get to see some interesting stuff. Xion has actual combos and have a revenge value that makes her short fight feel like an actual encounter. Kinda like Data Roxas in the Armor of the Master fight in Birth by Sleep. I'm going off topic here, but can I just say, I hate when people use Wheel of Fate in this scene with her though. Because with how it's designed, she's hitting the netting of it and it covers Sora's face and it just looks bad. Stop using it here, it looks trash.
It's all right. You can stop now. It's all right.
What are you looking at, you baked potato? Anyway, Sayax is Sayax. He berserks around like a toddler in the middle of a temper tantrum, flails his sword thing, and has a pretty decent revenge value. In fact, when he's taking a nap after running himself ragged and all three of you are attacking him, it's almost comical in how fast his health bar goes down. It's a spectacle fight, and one I praised earlier, and I have nothing to add to this cathartic ass-kicking. So let's move on from this masterpiece of a fight to arguably the most emotional fight cul-de-sac, which... God damn, this fight is amazing! It's Terranort and Venus making you eat shit, and damn it, I love how aggressive this fight is. They behave the way they did in Birth by Sleep, but it's more hectic since it's both of them, and you have actual party members for this fight. And yes, Aqua, go off! Then take your heart back, you lovable idiot! God, I love this game. Sorry. Just had to make that clear that if anything else, these last 2 hours are just top tier fights and you cannot convince me otherwise. The final four are all different variations of Xehanort. You first have Ansem, Xemnas, and young Xehanort in this glorious three-way fight that takes advantage of the fact that you're fighting 3 prior final bosses together and it is fucking hype incarnate! I have no words, no notes, no nothing for this trio of fights because they serve as the last hurrah for this saga and all that has come before and all that will come later. It's a perfect final gauntlet before the actual final boss gauntlet. They all have range, close-up, AoE, and just every kind of attack possible because they themselves were the final bosses of their games, and it makes for really interesting encounters because of this complexity in their designs. The only thing I would say that is a personal gripe is that Xemnas doesn't ever wear his white and black zebra coat, but other than that, it's perfectly fine. For the most interesting end of these three, kill them in this order. First young Asinort, then Mansex, then Ansem, because of how his speech is supposed to hit the player. Anyway, moving on to Wiggles McFingers himself, Bald Xehanort. So this final boss is amazing. The first 3 phases are what the fandom has dubbed Goat Xehanort, because of his helmet. So I'm just gonna call him Goaty. Goaty starts with you fighting similar versions of the organization in his armor, and it's so cool. Once you kill them, it's just you, your best friends, and a goat man. And if I'm being honest, this is my favorite final boss of the series. Why? Because it has no gimmicks, no stupid arbitrary bullshit like a dragon or a quick time event, or like 10 phases to it where you're restricted for no other reason than just padding. Yes, I'm looking at you, Final Ansem and Xemnas, your human bosses are top tier shit, but the in-between nonsense is boring. The only weird thing this fight asks you to do is to use underwater combat, which isn't broken in this game, so it's actually an alright encounter. It has its victory lap where you can use underwater magic and just wreck him a bit, and then you're done. After that, you're in the air, and you have glide, so you're able to move around the stage to actually hit this fucker, so yes, I love Goaty. And Baldy? Well, he, much like Phase 2 Syax, is all spectacle. Yes, it has a difficulty curve, but it still has a spectacle to it that, much like the combat, it's satisfying to watch, play, and the end bit where Sora gets blasted and dies is so perfectly ended that I love this moment when Donald and Goofy are yelling at you through your controller, and then you get a death beam struggle like in Birth by Sleep, but this one's just more fulfilling. My only real problem with this fight is the lack of tension between our hero and villain. Like, yeah, he killed Kairi, but other than that, they've never met and have built up no animosity towards each other. It reminds me of Hercules because he doesn't meet Hades until they make the deal, then Meg gets crushed, and then he goes to confront Hades because he can undo it, and the tension is just gone because this isn't a rivalry. It's just the climax. There's not anything other than the girl he's been stapled to getting fridged. Overall, Cage 3 stumbles in a few areas, but the Keyblade Graveyard bosses are not one of those moments. However, before we move on, we have one final thing to talk about, and that's Dark Inferno. I'll keep this quick. This guy is not the end-all and be-all of hard bosses. He is, however, one of the better designed ones. He's not like Phantom or KH1 Xemnas or even No Heart. No, this guy is more like the Data Weizen 2. He is hard, but he has a workable set of moves. He has 3 distinct phases that evolve his attacks and is generally a nice fight to learn, even if he has that one bullshit stun move. He's like Wargoyle or Demyx, easy to read revenge values with maybe one bullshit thing that takes time to learn how to avoid. His ultimate is little more than just swinging harder, and even if you get caught in it, you won't get one-shotted for giggles, Lingering Will. If you hate this fight because it's not the next coming of Big Dick Daddy raping your virgin hole with his Keyblade dildo, then you clearly don't know what makes a fun boss. Memorizing frame-perfect timing and guard spamming and exploiting the 8 picoseconds you get to attack that will punish you if you so much to step a toe out of line of his rules is not fun. It's bullshit. I shouldn't have to loop his ult for an easier time, or just use Duck Flare for an easy win. I should be able to come at it in several different ways that aren't cheese, and Dark Inferno does that. Kingdom Hearts 3 gets a lot of shit for its big monsters, but in all honesty, I get why there are so many. There are 20 human bosses. Yes, most of them are in group fights, but we've fought all of these guys before, so I'm not too mad we didn't get them alone in the base game. One thing that does interest me about the group fights, and a few others if we're being honest, Tornado Titan, is that with the retry options and the boss phase checkpoints, dying becomes less annoying because now you're not stuck with having to do the Ice and Lava Titans again if you swap out your gear. And it stops you from seeing cutscenes again, even if you can skip them. But y'all remember the Riku Ansem fight? Yeah, that shit hurts your soul, doesn't it? The big monster fights are here in such excess for 2 reasons. 1, to make those later humanoid fights stand out the way they do by sheer contrast, and 2, the engine and arena size accommodate for how big these guys are. I mean, you all remember the Chinese parade float in KH2, right? Big monster, very small area to fight him in. Or Zoldan, big AoE attacks, narrow-ass bridge to deal with them. I would like about half of them to be turned into humanoid bosses from a story perspective, but if that happened, these 20 fights in the base game would mean less. So while I think that, I don't want it any other way than it is right now. Something I need to make abundantly clear before we start on this mess of a topic is that the worlds in this game are big, massive, detailed, and are full of life. Except for one, because of reasons. But other than that, the worlds are a treat to explore and are interesting to look into. I'm going a bit out of order here, but I'm looking to Twilight Town first because it gets a lot of flack for no reason. So, the world is small, there is no denying that, and apparently they were thinking of having it be a part of the game in full, since they modded most of the town and you don't get to see like 90% of what was built along with the mysterious tower, despite that being a critical location in the game's story. However, I don't find it to be that big of an issue. I mean, look at these NPCs walking around. Look at their animations, their movements. Hell, some of them talk about how Cypher and the crew are off on a training exercise if you pay attention. Twilight Town may not be big, but it is densely packed with details to accommodate for that lack of extra areas to explore. I like the fact that it's here at all, and has something new to bring us back that isn't just a repeat of the past games. Do I wish it was bigger? Yes. Do I want the mysterious tower back? Yes. But it just wasn't in the cards because of the development cycle. See, Square had to make and release the E3 2013 trailer earlier than Nomura wanted, and that proved to be a hindrance in more ways than one. As a result of this trailer being released so early in the game's lifespan, it put long-term fans into a frothing frenzy because, oh my god, yes, finally it's coming, I can't believe it. It's been 10 years, we're finally here, my dudes. And while I understand that reaction, most people forgot that not even a year prior, hell, not even 9 months prior, Dream Drop Distance released in North America. And while it wasn't what they wanted, it was a vital story installment that set up Kingdom Hearts 3 more so than Coded or Days did, and is on par, if not better, than Birth by Sleep if we're being honest here, at least in terms of the story significance. Gameplay is all over the place, but still. Not to mention the fact the team switched engines 1 year into development from the Luminos engine, the one they used for Final Fantasy XV, to the Unreal Engine 4, which I do think was a smart choice. So while some things were rushed, you cannot say the worlds are worse off because of it. Twilight Town and Thebes are full of people, so is the Kingdom Square in Corona, along with Port Royale being jam-packed with people, and San Francisco has people just spattered around. The worlds are full of life and love and care, so that little hiccup doesn't really matter when only 2 worlds that we've already seen got gypped in the process. The team did what they could with what they had, and honestly, I'm glad we got 8 fully realized worlds and 2 smallish areas that we've already seen before, rather than the other way around. With that tangent over and done with, let's look at the rest of the worlds. Olympus is vertically and horizontally stacked, and what I mean by that is that it's as tall as it is long. Thebes has several huge areas that are detailed, full of life, and are varied enough to be distinct. The town is lived in and is just so interesting to explore. The mountain's base is long, full of enemies, has a lot of detailed foliage, and I live for this art design. God, Hercules is an underrated movie. The mountain itself is tall, wide, full of secrets to explore, and is as interesting to look around as the town below. For fuck's sake, there's a consistent weather change that happens because of how high you are on the clouds, that it's constantly raining. The mountain and town are designed to teach you what the game offers in terms of its level geometry. There are walls to run up, chests to find, and even little bonuses for just taking in your surroundings. The realm of the gods is kinda barren if I'm being honest. I wish there were more gods around, like Hephaestus and his forge, or Hermes wants to race you and you need flow motion to win, or even glide if you're feeling lazy. Maybe have Hera there and, have her and Zeus be more encouraging with their words to say or something. Just anything to make this area feel more alive than just Zeus. I mean, they model Hermes, Apollo, and Athena in the chain-breaking scene, so I don't see why not just having like a mini quest or something. It could be because of the development cycle, but like I said, it's just not that big of a deal. Anyway, the Realm of the Gods actually has an area that most people miss if they just go straight through. If you head left, you're treated to a little side area with some heartless and a couple of chests. There is a lucky emblem, but you can't do much with those on your first visit. But it's still nice this is an optional area for your first time through. I wish more levels had this kind of stuff, it's neat. If you go right, you're at Hephaestus' Forge, where you make the Knight Shield Plus, which, again, I wanted more stuff like this. Maybe in Arendelle you could use the Ice Fire in Elsa's Palace by melting it, and the combination of her magic and your not of that world magic made Donald like a Blizzard-centric staff, or you needed the pirate ship to fill it with water that shattered once it was full. My point is, Olympus is great for what it does and how it teaches the player about how the game operates. I'm going to skip the 100 Acre Woods for right now, seeing as it is just a minigame world, so it doesn't really make sense to talk about it in such detail twice. Toy Box is really 2 areas with several small zones inside of it when you think about it. You have Andy's room and the street outside of it, and then Galaxy Toys with all the shops inside, which I don't mind. I think it makes sense and is a smart way to have the toy store done without it being a chain of stores that are connected by the street that you walk into from the sidewalk. Andy's room is just an Easter egg hunter's wet dream. There are so many details and little things to it that make it worth exploring, even if it is such a small area. I kinda wish that they could've let you go in the rest of the house, but I digress. The wallpaper and bedspread had to be triple checked because of where this falls in the Toy Story timeline. It had to be the stars and not the clouds, because that's his now room in his new house, not his old room from the first movie. Little things like that make all the difference, you know? The street is straight out of the movie, and I mean that in the good way. Everything in the street is just pixel perfect, and I think that's to its benefit because Galaxy Toys was an original location that didn't need to be jam-packed with detail, so they kinda went ham on the familiar locales. levels. Galaxy Toys, on the other hand, has 3 floors that all have different functions. The first floor, which I've nicknamed the Gold Floor, introduces you to how big of enemies you're going to be facing in this world, and mech combat. The mech fight is meant to teach you about how to approach different things in the game. You could just hit them till they die, but the mech you start the fight in makes everything 10 times easier by virtue of the fact of how hard and how much they hit. There really isn't anything to the first floor other than that fight. There's like 2 lucky emblems, and then the giant prize machine that is meant to act as your non-shot lock method of traversal through the store. The second floor, or the pink lipstick floor as I like to call it, has the tiniest Jamba Juice I've ever seen, and the quote-unquote boy toy store, which disappointingly is not a Tom Holland J. Crew photo shoot, but we can't all get what we want, now can we? My favorite thing about this place is that it has original Heartless toys just kinda here, and then they have Final Fantasy looking toys, which sell what she advertised in the fucking level, I guess, I don't know. And the dinosaur toys from the Toy Story shorts that take place between 3 and 4. I don't know why, but that makes me smile that they put in the effort to put minor characters in as background bits. It's just fun. I mean, in this store you can find a Dino Rock'em Sock'em Robots game that if you win, you get a chest. Take note, publishers! This is a fun thing that rewards the player for dinking around, and God, I hope this comes back in future games, because the first time I saw this, I grinned from ear to ear, and every time I play through, it's the first thing I do after the scripted fight in this room. The third floor, or the sky blue floor, has babies and toddlers as its name. So there are 3 stores here. Dolls, Kid Corral for the parents leave the kids while they go shopping, and video games, for some reason. Don't get me wrong, that would have made sense on the second floor with all the dinosaurs in the rest area, not because dinosaurs and video games are for boys. I knew plenty of girls who loved, and still do, dinosaurs, but that store is more meant for older kids. Now, I get why it's not on the second floor. That's because every floor needed a save point, and the rest area made more sense at that point in the story, but I don't know, it just seems kind of odd to have a doll store for little girls, a kid corral, and then a store selling games rated 10 and up. They just don't really mesh, you know what I mean? I like the idea of a toy store being a central hub to explore a bunch of different places while still being interesting to explore. Hell, there's a transition from one floor to the next with vents. You navigate the vents from the dinosaur store into the doll section in a very sneaky way. I like the vents section. It's a connecting tissue from one zone to the other. It's kind of like muscle in a way. And it's just an interesting callback to areas in past games, seeing as you're in a cramped environment with combat that was not designed for it, so players can see why the game and its combat is so wide and has so big of a hitbox than any other game in the series. The Kid Corral itself is a nice play place for kids that looks fun to be in, and is an all-around great semi-final area. I do have to reiterate though, that the King of Toys playroom is so cute and fun and creative, because this looks like what you would have a 3-year-old's playroom to be, with the foam mats and block toys and all that stuff, and now it's some fucking asshole's temper tantrum room, and it's great. Corona is a very horizontally stacked world. It's basically a straight line from the tower to the kingdom, but there are different areas that all look distinct from one another. Like, the clearing and the place where you meet Marluxia are mainly open plains for Rapunzel to fight in. The thick wooded area is designed for you to fight by yourself, since the 2 of them aren't meant to be with you in the playthrough. The marshlands are much the same, but it's also just unique on its own because it's the most purple place in the world. Not a bad thing, just pointing it out. The cavern and open field are meant to give variety for the gang to go up against, as well as just being different and referencing the cavern from the movie, which is always a plus. The town square itself is full of people, and it's just a lovely little place to be in because of how cozy it feels. The docks seem inviting, the town square is charming, and overall is just someplace I want to visit. I don't have much to talk about in Corona because it is just that straight of a shot to the kingdom, but the adventure was fun and the story was well told, which is all I wanted. I'm jumping around a tad and going to Arendelle because it has the best parallel to Corona, and comparing them is worth doing in my mind. If Corona was horizontally stacked, then Arendelle is vertically stacked, and the problem with that is, unlike the forest with its varied locales and different ideas for its forest sections, Arendelle is just fucking snow. Now, I need to elaborate on something before I go forward. I love snow. Snow is one of my favorite weathers ever. Aside from like 75 degrees in autumn at sunset, snow is my favorite thing. And I like the colors used here and how this is the only level to have a night to day transition, which really does make things stand out on a first playthrough. I do need to acknowledge that Tangled had more areas to work with than Frozen did in its movie. However, Frozen also had the Troll Village and the actual kingdom to work with, so I don't know why we're on the mountain and nothing else. The level is designed so that you walk up it one way, get knocked down, then walk up it again, but from a different direction, and then you get knocked down again to do a boss fight with your newly acquired party member, and then leave. What? I get that Disney was really particular with Frozen, but you would think they would want one of their other two main locations in the film that isn't the stupid mountain in the game. I just don't get it. Okay, now that that's done, let's look at the actual areas really quick. Most of the first third of the world is very open and spacious fields to fight in, which is nice for grinding and just adjusting to the new Deer Heartless. Best Heartless design in the game, FYI. The second chunk is more to do with narrow, winding paths, which I will admit is nice since it's a change up from the previous locales and variety is nice. And then the last bit is this one big open area so you can learn how Marshmallow operates, then you do this stupid blizzard avoidance section and then a boss fight and then you leave. So yeah, it's very segmented and not in the fun way. I will say the Ice Labyrinth is a nice location, but its execution is odd because Larxene is the one who makes it despite her power being lightning, so that makes no fucking sense. And while it is interesting to explore, it just seems out of left field. Again, Disney had a vice grip on this place, so I'm not surprised this was reworked from the final part of the world into just a random segment in a level that is desperate for anything to distinguish itself from like Land of Dragons or some shit. Overall, it looks like the movie, which all of these do, but the problem comes in when it all looks the same when you have two areas that could have made this feel more interesting than, oh look, more snow. Monstropolis as a level is more enclosed than the rest of the game, but the ceilings are high enough that combat doesn't come off as cramped or even a clusterfuck. Well, more so than usual. The level design is very boxy, but we're in a building, so that makes sense. And overall, the level is meant to feel very industrial. I do wish the doors were used more, but the way they're used here is satisfying in the way that they're meant to hide loading screens and just getting us from point A to point E without going through the extra rooms that add nothing. There isn't much to talk about with Monstropolis since it is just the factory. When you see it, you go, oh look, the door factory. And I do think that is something worth commending. It is boring to look at, I will admit that, but it's a factory, guys. What did you expect? I mean, the places in the factory are distinct enough, but it's still a factory, and I have to give them credit for at least making it worth going through more so than Arendelle. Pirates is just a marvel to behold in this game. I mean, just look at this map, look at how far out these islands go, and how many of them there are, and just how many chests there are to get. I cannot go into detail about every single island on their own, otherwise this video would be triple the length easily. The water is swimmable and the land is worth exploring. That's a lot of good things. The crabs are placed and are plentiful enough that leveling up your ship is not hard at all, and it makes ship combat way easier when it comes up. I will say that Port Royale is just so fun to look through. I mean, just look at how big this one area is. Look at how much they put into the town that you only visit once. It's a fucking treasure on its own. The islands are all unique and distinct and fun to look through and find all the little things that make each one their own thing. It's just fun. It's just a treat, and I don't know how people hate this place based on its level design or gameplay. Story I can get, but we'll get there. Pirates overall is a fun time, albeit hindered by its plot, but the sheer amount of stuff to do more than makes up for it. San Fran is much the same as Pirates and Toy Box, in that it only has two areas, one small and one large. The problem is that unlike the other two, this level has one tiny cramped area and one huge area that is difficult to navigate if you don't remember the layout. See, where Toy Box has sections of the world that were dictated by the story you were in, and Pirates has a decently sized town full of people to observe and explore, and like 12 islands to pillage and rake with your giant key, San Fran is just the city and nothing else. Yes, the city is large, but it has only one subsection I can think of that is different enough to warrant a mention, and that's the marketplace on the upper left-hand side of the map. And that's only because the buildings were lower than everything around them, and it has those traditional-looking Asian-style roofs. I don't hate this world. No, I just feel like it could have gone to that old science building or just had more than one location to explore. Hell, Pirates had Davy Jones's ship, which was something different, even if it was only for the boss fight. So while I enjoy looking at San Fran, once you've seen it the first time, you've seen it all. I'm jumping around again here, but the final world is beautiful in its simplicity. I mean, it's just clouds and clear water. It's so pretty and yet a nice look into the human condition since it literally makes you reflect on your life. Not a lot to say about the design, other than it's pretty, easy to appreciate, simple, and clean. The Keyblade Graveyard is simple, and simple isn't a bad thing. This has always been a simple place. In every iteration, it's mainly a wide open field with tons of room to fight in, and it serves that purpose well. The maze Xehanort spawn serves a way to make the fights feel more connected and emotional than it would be if they were in a giant clusterfuck like they are in Scala. I will say that I find it weird that the engravings on the walls are hard to make out. I would have preferred a more etched in and defined set of engravings, but that's just me. Side note before we go to the final two is the world icon. I know I didn't bring these up until now, and that's because they're just mini versions of the world you're in, so it's not really much to talk about there. I will say that they are filled to the brim with detail. If you ever want to see them up close, take a look at the video the 13th Vessel did. In this case, I wanted to look at the world icon because it has something that's really cool that I never noticed. All the keyblades that are behind the mountain are ones Sora's used in the past games, and I just thought that was a really nice touch. Scala itself is just a lovely place. Until we destroy it fighting Goaty. My bad. I know we see more of it in Remind, but we're not there yet. Anyway, Scala is meant to be a boss arena, and it does that very well. It's big, it's pretty, it's varied in its locations, and overall is just impressive to look at. The level design of the game is, as I hope I've made clear, is stunning in its level of detail, film accuracy, and presentation. No two worlds feel the same, and no two visits feel the same because stuff changes after you beat the world. I enjoyed that aspect of things because it feels so alive and different from past games. The only thing that would have made the game better was after you beat Monstropolis, Roz came in and did the Wazowski meme. Yes, Arendelle is boring for its repetitive landscapes, but overall, while I hate it, I'm not super bothered by it, if that makes any sense. Winter is my favorite season after all, so seeing a world like that is nice, if not a tad one note. However, everything else? Well, that's just pure Disney magic. Minigames in the franchise have been pretty sporadic. In 1, they were pretty much just the 100 Acre Woods and like Merlin's Magic Place. Chain of Memories was basically the same thing. Birth by Sleep had Disney Town, the Mirage Arena, and the Command Board, and Dream Drop Distance had the Challenge Gates and Flick Rush. Kingdom Hearts 2, on the other hand, had a plethora of options, such as the 100 Acre Woods, the skateboards, the Mushroom 13, the ability to replay story segments like the Carpet Flying section in Agrabah, and all that fun stuff. In fact, it would be faster to list the worlds that don't have any minigames to play at all. Those being Beast's Castle after you defeat the Mushroom 13, the Pride Lands, Atlantica, and the World That Never Was, again after beating the Mushroom. I'm laying all this out to explain that while the series is known for its mini-games, really only one of them has anything to compare to. Yes, 3 does borrow the Battle Gates from Dream Drop Distance and the old-timey Disney games from Birth by Sleep, which in that case were Mario Kart Blade, the embodiment of modern-day torture, and Aqua's Vegan Ball. But overall, 3 feels the most like 2 in its execution. 3 has a minigame in every world besides Olympus and Monstropolis, but that makes sense seeing as other than the Flan, which we'll get to in a moment, they had no other opportunity to introduce a minigame into that world story. And honestly, I'm fine with that, because the Flan and the minigames we did get are at the very least entertaining on their own. Olympus has something that I do want to touch on that fits best here, since there isn't really anywhere else to put it. I'm also throwing in 0.2 into this because they share this one aspect. So, as I said, Olympus doesn't have a minigame like other worlds, and that's fine. But what it does have is this kid talking to you about wanting 5 golden Herc statues that are around Thebes, and if you bring him all 5, he gives you a piece of armor that is a pretty nice snag on low level or even crit playthroughs, because these flame cores are dicks. 0.2 did this thing where they had like 50 random tasks for you to do that netted you a piece of cosmetic wear that you could put on Aqua. Sure, it broke the tone with those neon cat ears or the odd wings, but it was at least something to make you replay and scour the world for the chests or the flowers that would represent the 3 good fairies, or even just those zodiac signs for the boss fight. It wasn't stupendous, but it was something that I hope they would have carried over, and Olympus was a step in that direction, but it got cut for time, I think. Now, obviously, I don't want these weird cosmetic changes, but maybe if you did all of them, you get like a permanent second form ability that changes Sora's clothes in combat to make him look more like second form, or even a first form option that makes him look like Kingdom Hearts 1 Sora. Yes, I really want this, stop asking. Just something to make the extra exploring be more fun and give the players more than just chests to find or trophies to unlock. An in-game tangible reward is always a plus. That was just one of the few real gripes I had with the game, and it was a crunch time problem, so I can't get too mad at it. Anyway, onward and upward. Toybox has the Verum Rex Beat of Lead minigame that puts you in the game by chaining together as many gratuitous deaths of innocent NPCs as possible without taking too much damage or losing the chain. Not gonna lie here, this shit is dope. It's so satisfying to get the combo and perfect the route through the waves of enemies to get that elusive A rank. Speaking of ranks, when you get an A rank or even a B rank on any minigame, they give you a really helpful item or even a unique ability. Well, besides Pooh Bear stuff, but that's because they give you food instead of actual abilities. I won't tell you what you get from A ranking certain events, because I think that just takes the fun out of it. However, I will say please get an A rank on the festival dance, because the ability it gives you is shockingly good. The Kingdom Dance itself is just like it is in the main story. The difference now is that instead of filling up a meter, you're just getting a combo chain and a time bonus for dancing with people in addition to your score for keeping the rhythm. It's a much better minigame than in KH2's Atlantica. But then again, I think that's fun enough on its own, so what do I know? Arendelle sees you with probably the lengthiest minigame of them all, and that's the sledding game where you grab 10 crystals. Although, unlike the rest of these where you can get it done in 1 or 2 goes, this one requires you to go through it 10 times. Less if you snag 2 or 3 crystals in one go, but what are the odds you're going to do that your first time through? Oh, did I mention that you have to get a high score as well? Because you do. So that's fun. See, the 10 crystals are if you're trying to get the Orcachulum Plus. The high score, which you probably won't get until you've gotten all the damn things anyway, is just something to do when you're in New Game Plus. The game itself is fine if you're going after the high score, going through all the caves and on the hills and all that stuff, but when you're getting all the bits of floating cancer, well, that's when it becomes a chore. I will say that chaining together rail jumps to get higher and higher, along with getting all those little starbit looking things, is really fun, and is typically how I do my high score run, since it's the most interesting path, since, again, this would probably be your 11th run of this stupid track. Man, Arendelle is not having a good day today, is it? Pirates doesn't really have a minigame, but I count ship combat as a minigame because it's there enough to be fleshed out, but doesn't overstay its welcome. The ship can be upgraded via crabs, and that gives you more cannons, and after that world story is done, if you fully level up Sora's ship, you can take the wheel of the most coveted ship in the franchise, the Black Pearl. Which who wouldn't want to do that? That sounds so fucking cool. The ship-specific moves like Tidal Wave and the constant cannon fire is just an interesting way to do combat, and is overall fun to learn and tinker with. The more you sail around and fight ships, the better you become with it until you're able to show the big dingus what's good. The 100 Acre Woods is a small, one-area minigame hub that holds 3 versions of the same game, just with different special abilities to each one to give the illusion of a difference in gameplay. All it is puzzle bobble. You shoot flowers or fruits or vegetables into a patch of never-ending stuff and get points for combos and all that jazz, which is fine. Once. Had each game been a different kind of matching game, it might have been a fun idea. Like, one of them being the thing that we got would have worked fine. Then maybe there's like a Tetris-like one, where you have to get the fruit to be all on the same level to clear the board, and whatever character is assigned to that game will be at the bottom to remove a row to give you more room. And then maybe another one can be like a Candy Crush game where it's a match 3 kind of stuff. Those are already other popular ideas, and you could have just had them all 3 be different kinds of games. But for whatever reason, we're just stuck with the same thing, and it baffles me. I do have to say though, the minigame music is so fun to listen to. It has this like energetic working time song. You'd hear it like a daycare when it's time to clean up, or a town festival or something, I don't know, but the way it hits my earballs is just satisfying. In fact, all the minigame music is really good. I already talked about the ship music, so I won't retread that here, but the Verum Rex music is very Final Fantasy feeling, which I get was the point, but still. And the Kingdom Dance is very reminiscent of the movie, while also being its own thing, and I love it for that. And while I've grown tired of the sledding one, the music is very bouncy and feels like I'm actually going down a mountain. It's actually the one saving grace the minigame has if you're as sick of it as I am. The Flantastic 7, which is an adorable name by the way, are 7 special heartlets that pop up in the worlds after you reach a certain checkpoint in the story. For instance, you can't access the Flawn in Olympus until you beat the Titans and the rubble blocking the stairs is gone. But in Corona, the one in the clearing is available directly after you follow Rapunzel and Flynn up the hill. The Flawn are the Mushroom 13 of this game, which if you think about it ties into the whole 7 light and 13 darkness thing in a strangely poetic way. See, where the Mushroom 13 wanted you to hit them like the little masochists they are, the Flawn want you to take pictures or play games or bounce on them or just whatever their kink is. Like the cherry one in Toy Box wants to get dizzy, but the watermelon in San Fran wants you to step on them because you're their senpai, and the one in Monstropolis is really into vor, and we don't condone that in this household. So as punishment for its sins, we electrocute its children. And the list goes on and on. One thing I like is that these tie into the cooking. If you achieve the required score, you get 3 of the respective Flawn dragon fruits. If you get an average score, they'll give you one of each instead. These are used in the Bistro's special menu, and I love it. Even with 2 Gourmand's rings, they're really tough to get an excellent on. Although save scumming can make that easier, but that could be said for anything. And aside from the Thunder upgrade needed for the Vor one, or even King's Flare or Sea Spectacle, you can tackle them at any level once they're unlocked, because they're mostly reaction-based tasks rather than beating the fuck out of some random thing that bears you no ill will. Plus, look at these pictures I took of this little diva. They're just so cute. I mean, there's this one and this one and this. Oh god! Cooking in general is a nice way to implement not only Ratatouille, but also stats and buffs into a series that typically doesn't have those things. The buffs are pretty substantial if you use the foods with little pluses on them, which I'm glad there's a distinction for good and excellent, since it makes the buffs all that more satisfying to get. For instance, you can have a meal with a Blazaza boost and have the Thunder, Fire, and Arrow cufflinks on, which all give you the Za level magic of that type without needing to meet the requirements. So basically you can spam Za level magic all day and night, and boy is that fun! The cooking on its own is really nice, even if you never eat the food. The 4 mini-games in this are pretty simple. It boils down to just moving the joystick or hitting a button at the right time. The one I'd say is flat out bad is the egg crack, because without those aforementioned rings, these things break at the slightest pressure. I suppose you could make the argument that that incentivizes you to use them, but A, if you're unaware of these things or don't check the items, or never receive one in the mailbox, you can easily miss them, and B, you should need an external item to make a mini-game easier. Maybe that's just a me thing, but I think you should be able to do it at your own pace. If I had to rank them from worst to best, it'd probably be this order, and the only reason Pepper is second to last is by sheer default, and again can show how much of a difference those rings make in these mini-games. They're by no means bad, however, they do get repetitive after a while, since in reality, you're doing the seasoning or prep work that Remy physically can't, like lifting a skillet, cracking an egg, lifting and cracking pepper, or cutting fruit. All things that he had Linguini do, he now makes Sora do it. And while I would have loved to see him skating around in some cutscenes handing out food, and generally being a delightful idiot, while his girlfriend is in the kitchen plating while Remy cooks, I like how they implemented Sora into that role and kinda ignore the rest. Although the end credits show how agile this little fuck is, so I guess she'd be redundant? I don't know. The battle gates were hard to place because they're combat-based challenges, but they're only unlocked after the game is beat, and are really just mini challenges to flex your late game gamer skills. My best option was to put them here because the boss section was getting too long, and the combat section was more about how Sora attacks with the tips of his hair spikes, and in the interest of covering everything best I can, they go here as a result. The gates are hordes of enemies that had special Heartless, reused bigger enemies like the Rock Golem, and even has the Berserk and Mage buddies from KH2 as the quote-unquote bosses of their respective gates, which I'm thankful for. Not that they were overly challenging in 2, but they were a pain since the mages were immune to magic and had really hard-hitting attacks with those damn cubes. This is just another subtle reason why coded sucks. Blocks just make everything worse, Nomura. Stop trying to incorporate them. Every time you do, they just grind my teeth down another millimeter. The Berserkers were susceptible to magic, which made them a lot easier to deal with, but their desperation move is a bitch if you get stuck in it, because it ignores second chances once more due to that final plunging attack. Thankfully, they added in the fact that it takes longer, so you can recover from the stagger and hopefully get out of the way. I will say one big thank you for these things is the fact that you can use the Arendelle one to grind for fast leveling if you have the ultimate weapon and the XP boost ability from the full course meal. Honestly, the only non-shit thing about Arendelle, besides that field theme that is, the Demon Tide is a lot easier in the battle gates because it's confined to this one room and has half its moves gimped, so that's fun. The biggest things the gates give you are selfie poses and abilities, along with the secret reports, which is nice. The secret reports are just Nomura's weird flex but okay on the lore, because why the hell not? I'll be honest here, I've never read the reports in any game, and the reason for that is I just never cared enough because I came into the series as an adult, so the little lore bits are explained in later games, so I didn't see a reason until now. I like them. They're not needed, but they're a fun way to get people to come back for more, and if you're super into the lore, they're good rewards for the higher challenge these things present. But for someone like me, who doesn't really care about the lore, they are, at the very least, bits of flavor text on who Xehanort and all the baddies are. Do you guys feel lucky? I'm asking because this game has lucky emblems coming out of its ass. Every world besides the final 3 have lucky emblems in them, and they are honestly one of my favorite things in the game to go after. There's around 10 lucky emblems in each world besides Pooh's storybook, which only has 3. The only downside to lucky emblems is that sometimes they blend in really well and that it's hard to find them. Those are very far and few between, but I thought I'd mention them anyway. My favorite ones are the optical illusion ones, like this conveniently scattered string of leaves, or these 3 disco balls, or these rocks. Stuff like that is just really cool, and I hope they bring these things back in future games because my God, are these things fun. Also, for collecting all of them, you get the Mickey clasp, and if you pair that with the ability called Magic Combo Thrift, it allows you to cast endless magic, essentially giving you the Berserk ability from Kingdom Hearts 2, but for magic. And as a little bonus, these things directly tie into the secret ending. See, whereas before it was random or tied to your journal progression or the super bosses, fuck I hate this fight, now it's based on your lucky emblem count. If you're on proud mode, you need 30, which is easy considering that most in the early game are easy to get. For standard, you need 60, and for beginner, you need all 90 of them. And some are really hard to find if you don't know where to look. Good luck, with the Caribbean assholes. That place sucks when you're going for those. The emblems are a fun way to keep players coming back to the worlds to see what they missed, and that's a hell of a good way to do it. Plus, the secret ending is a good way to motivate people. Now, some of you might remember in my base legacy video, I said that Dream Drop Distance ruined its secret ending by not making it worth a piss to get, since it was just a mini game and a Q&A. I derided it for being bullshit because in order to get it, you had to nail it perfectly or it's back to the boss gauntlet for you. I like the emblems here because it again is tied into difficulty like in KH1 and 2. However, where the emblem system shines is that you can do it at your own pace and it's not super taxing. One thing that I hated in Kingdom Hearts 2 was that in order to get the secret ending, you had to beat all 13 data fights, their absent silhouettes, and the lingering will, and that's just on critical. If you wanted to do that on any difficulty lower than critical, here are the steps you have to take. On proud, you must complete each world in the game, plus all the Mushroom 13, and all 14 super bosses. On standard, you must do all of that and complete Jiminy's Journal. That means doing all the worlds, the mini games, the super bosses, the mushroom, the synthesis material collecting, both Colosseums, get your summon gauge level 9 to unlock the Hades Paradox Cup, beat Hayner and Cypher 10 times to beat the Sephiroth knockoff 1 time, and for extra fun, defeat the real Sephiroth in Radiant Garden. Oh, and you can't even get the secret ending on beginner. So, sucks to be you scrub. Now tell me, honestly, what sounds more fun to do? 100% completing a game just so you can see an admittedly cool-ass scene that you'll probably end up seeing in an in-game engine not too long after anyway, or collecting 90 pictures of Mickey's head? That's what I thought. The last thing I want to touch on in this section is the gummy ship. Good God, is this thing more fun than it's ever been. The reason for that is, there's tons of stuff to do, and you're not forced to do most of it. No, seriously, you can ignore this thing besides 3 boss fights. 1 in front of Toy Box, 1 in front of Monstropolis, and 1 in front of the Keyblade Graveyard. And they're a decent challenge if you just use the default ship without upgrading or doing abilities or any of that stuff. I like the horde battles, I like the damage you do, I like the warp pipes everywhere, and the boost button's nice when you want to get going. If you do go treasure hunting, then you're rewarded with bigger, better ship pieces, and even melding materials if you go on a meteor hunt so grand that it would make asteroids blush. Hell, they even brought in pictures in the form of constellations, which act just like lucky emblems. The music for this is so good too. Yes, the first theme is just the generic gummy ship theme, and even the second theme is really good. Like, really fun to listen to, I'm not gonna lie. The Zone 3 theme is my favorite. While the other two sound like an epic space adventure, this one sounds like a lighthearted adventure kids would make up, and god do I love it. The only downside to the whole thing is that it's so slow if you don't mess with it. Yes, the warp pipes and boost mitigate this, but holy crap, is this like a snail pushing a boulder up a hill covered in mud? Okay, that's a bit far, but maybe if the base ship was like 50% faster, I'd be perfectly happy, but hey, that's just me. The minigames are meant more as time-killing busy work to make the game feel more varied than if it was just the initial visit and nothing else to bring you back, which I need to make clear, that is not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Games have padding all the time, at least this stuff is optional, and you don't have to do it at any specific time. Once it's unlocked, it's yours for the taking. The battle gates are a nice addition because they're a happy middle ground between the abundance of bonus bosses, which we'll get to in the Remind section, and just nothing at all. I think the Colosseum would have been nice, but with Phil's Japanese voice actor dying before production started, I can see why that would be hard to do, since everyone you talk to in this game has a voice, and him just being a splash screen would have been awkward. The gummy ship, the photos you can take of all the lucky emblems, and all that stuff is just fun. I like being able to take pictures of all the goodies, be they obvious or be they hidden. Either way, they sure are nice. Ain't that right, Wonder Boy? While I'm not a huge fan of all the minigames present in this title, I have to say that they're all at least different enough that I don't mind the ones that fall short. And besides, they're all better than that damn skateboard in Radiant Garden. Seriously, fuck whoever wanted that to be in the game, and that stupid ass 5,000 point achievement. That shit is ridiculous! When it comes to the story, this is the most divisive part to talk about. Some say you could ignore the story of the Disney worlds. Some say that the Disney worlds are time-wasting bullshit that makes you wait for the cool thing you came for. And others say that the whole thing is terrible because it's kinda crammed into the end rather than being spread out. And I don't get what people are talking about, like, at all. First of all, the plot of all of these games meanders for a bit before the final world happens. Sure, there's like 1 or 2 times in the plot where you meet the villain, but mostly the final world of the game has always been the final boss level in every sense of the word besides being called that directly. So that's just a non-argument people lob at this game because it did make you fight the organization members every step of the way before the finale, which would have been nice, I won't disagree, but that takes away from the whole point of the fights and Remind. So get over it. Also, before I get into the structure, I'm going to look at my issues with the Disney worlds, and then I'll get into the overarching plot. Alright, let's pick some nits. My only real gripe with the Disney worlds comes from Monstropolis, Arendelle, and the Caribbean. With Monstropolis, it's just that I wanted Randall to be a boss fight, and really that's my only complaint. Arendelle just needed less restrictions on the corporate side of things, and just a complete overhaul. Hell, if you wanted to keep the idea of walking up the mountain different times, have Elsa be the midpoint boss, with Marshmallow being an underling so that when he joins the party, it makes sense. The plot is fine if there's a reason Elsa is on Hans's shoulders, even if it's our fault. I personally would have preferred Elsa needing our help to stop the Heartless and other snow creatures she creates by accident with her powers. Then we can connect with her, and if you really want to keep the Skull boss fight, have Hans ambush you and take her away, but once you get to the bottom of the mountain, we can have her wake up and blast him in the face, and that turns him into the boss. Only this time we get to see Elsa in a new light, and for good measure, have her be in an outfit similar to Frozen 2, and have that be the outfit she changes into in this rendition of Let It Go. I honestly would have liked the story more if the characters, you know, the thing we come to these worlds for, were in the story more. And finally, with the Caribbean, it comes down to a simple question. Why the fuck was the grid in Dream Drop Distance and not Dead Man's Chest? Seriously, putting that world in the Sleeping Realm and having us go through the events of the movie that sets up at World's End would have made things 1000% easier to understand. Like, what the fuck, man? Think about it. All the exposition that you all hate in that world would be gone because it was explained in Dream Drop Distance because we have 2 characters to have different sections of the plot explained to them. I like Dream Drop Distance. It's in my top 5 games of the series, but the grid is just so pointless. And replacing it with pirates would have made things 10 times clearer. Why they didn't do this, I will never understand. Okay, so now that the nitpicky stuff is done, let's look at the overarching story structure. So if you remove 0.2, the game doesn't really have a prologue. We just have Olympus, and that's it. Yes, it's great, but it's not the typical way the series has done this. I personally don't mind, but it's whatever. Xigbar comes in and taunts Sora to get him going, which works. Maleficent and Pete keep popping up talking about the black box, and also tell Sora that he's weak. That keeps coming up in the first chunk of the game because, well, he is. He got reset and isn't able to do much yet, especially since the last time the people in question saw him. In Twilight Town, Ansem and Xemnas give the boys grief about looking for Roxas, and Goofy exposits the fact that these 2 are still here when Old Man Xehanort is too, even though that doesn't make sense, but whatever. In Toy Box, young Xehanort explains that this world is made of data, and is meant to show how hearts operate when you separate those bonds, how that relates to empty vessels, and by proxy, how that can help them. That's it, that's why everything is the way it is here, and why Asshat's here too. In Corona, Rapunzel is the pure light of the world, and if she's hurt, the world dies. And Marluxia thinks that it's in his best interest to keep her safe with Gothel because that way she stays 100% out of danger. Like a doll in a mint-conditioned box. He basically mind controls Gothel into helping him, and then reintroduces himself to Sora, and then fucks off until he puts Sora to sleep. Honest to God, outside of Larxene and Luxord, Marluxia is the most direct in his world's plot. In Monstropolis, Vanitas doesn't really appear until the end, which is surprisingly consistent with him now that I think about it, and that's only to explain what drew him here from the fear and screen residue left before the company switched. The Unverse come from him and he feeds off negative emotion. Simple and clean, no real problem. He then explains that Sora has Ven's heart and that ties into later when we rescue Ven, but we'll get there. In Arendelle, Larxene does the same thing as Marluxia and keeps Sora away from the girls so as to observe and collect them if need be. She also explains that the organization is looking for 7 new pure lights in case the Guardians decide to skip the fight. This ensures that our heroes will go no matter what. And can I pivot for just a moment? I get so sick and tired of people saying that the series has always done one-to-one retelling of the movie's plot with Sora and co just slapped on top, because aside from Arendelle and Atlantica and KH2, this has literally never been the case. Most of the time, they do help the people in those movies get to the end goal, but they do affect the plot and characters around them. Even Atlantica and KH2, you still affect the outcome of the finale because you knock the necklace off of Vanessa's chest, and that causes the climax to happen. Arendelle is the only world I can think of that plays out the exact same way if you remove Sora and co from the story, because Disney did tell them they could use it, but only in so much that it was an ad for the movie. Land of Dragons is Mulan adjacent, Arendelle is Frozen through and through. Okay, moving on. In Pirates, Luxord is after what he thinks might be the black box, and then realizes that it's not. And finally, Riku Replica is just a dick who tests the theory presented by young Xehanort and Vexen. That is quite literally all he does in terms of plot progression. Meanwhile, during all of this, Riku and Mickey are expositioning each other to death and trying to figure things out while filling in Sora and finding the Birth by Sleep trio. The organization are talking about the old Keyblade War, Vexen is a double agent, Ansem and Xemnas tell Sora to find Roxas. This sets up one of the main subplots of the game, and the surprising amount of Remind, now that I think about it. Vexen provides the organization with replicas, and explains that data plus a heart will make them as real as can be, and then gives one of those to the Radiant Garden Boys. I'm going through all of this not to give a plot synopsis, but to explain why everything happened the way it did, and that there are bits and pieces here that do in fact tie into the finale. And here's how. So once Riku gets beat by Aqua, Sora saves his ass, they summon the Gay Blade, and Sora beats the darkness out of Aqua. She then brings Sora, Donald, and Goofy along to get Ven, which Vanitas senses and gets to him first. Aqua flexes on him until, uh-oh, no she didn't, and Sora feels Ven call out to him and tells him that he's always had the power of waking, but just had to call on it for when it was needed. Now, many people have said that this was bullshit, and to that I say no on the value of go fuck yourself. The dive into the heart, which is what he's doing in this scene, is the power of waking. He did it in the first game, did it in the second game through Roxas, and even does it in the Roxas fight and the tutorial of this game. He's had it all along. Hell, that's how he woke up Ven the first time, so stop saying that doesn't make sense, because it does. Vanitas retreats, and the gang go back to catch up and make meta jokes. Ven and Aqua have a cute conversation, Riku talks to Riku Replica, and Kairi forces the Papoot fruit down Sora's throat. When it comes to the Keyblade Graveyard, it has a lot to talk about, and the whole final world thing and dive into the hearts of multiple worlds is nice, but it's not what I want to focus on here. Something I saw when the game first launched was this joke about how the game really should have ended with Yensid coming in and pulling a Doctor Strange and having every Disney character that has ever been a party member or even just met Sora in the gang pop up to help. And while that's a cool idea, it A, doesn't make sense because it would have taken a lot of time that the gang doesn't have, and B, would have cost all the money to pull off, and frankly would have made the ending seem stranger than it already was. I'm not saying the idea is stupid, far from it. I just don't see the point when the story is about these 20 or so characters at the end of the day, not the Disney characters. After all, they are just people that we help and becomes friends with, and just because they're friends doesn't mean we should put them in more danger that is absolutely necessary. Anyway, one thing that I love this section explains in no uncertain terms is the plot point and connection between Sora, Ven, and Vanitas that people seem to have forgotten the order of events, or just think that because Y is shown to us first, then X must then come after. Vanitas was essentially a blank vessel when created, and since he was already an incomplete heart when Sora fixed Ven's, he also fixed Vanitas's. It's a parallel mirror thing, guys, and before y'all say that doesn't make sense because Vanitas is pure darkness, Ven has always been a pure light and still had darkness in his heart. So therefore, logically, it stands to reason that Vanitas has some light. You can have good thoughts and still be a dickhead. Just saying. I mean, that's the internet on the whole, if we're being honest. Let me be clear about these cutscenes in the Keyblade Graveyard. They are wonderful, they are fun, and they are touching, but they also have a lot of resolution for things we've been told all game, and most of that comes from the Roxas, Xion, and Sayax fight. In one cutscene, we learn that the organization did secure the data of Xion, but didn't give her a heart, which is why she's able to change sides when Sora talks to her. We also learned that in order to travel as a heart, you need a connection. Roxas had help, but needed a connection to Xion and Axel, and Sora was that connection. action. This scene also explains that the organization is here because Xehanort had replicas waiting for them, and that he is the heart that connects them all. That comes into play when the gang goes inside his heart to fight him off. That's really it. I could talk about Terra and how he makes no sense here, but I don't want to. I'll talk about that when I talk about Remind. But for now, I want to look at the last scene of the game. For some reason, the writers changed Xehanort's goal from just wanting to see what would happen if he broke the universe, and now they've made it so that he wants to make the world better, since there's such an excess of light and the worlds need balance and all that. And to me, this is one of the few blunders the story actually has. If they would have kept him as a weirdly interested in the vein of curiosity of what would happen if I restarted the universe, it would have been way better. Like seriously, his motivation was fine. Why did you change it? While that is frustrating, I get retconning story elements. It happens all the time, so Anyway, when it comes to the endgame stuff, the epilogue is something I want to look at. So 4 of the foretellers come to the present to meet Luciu, who reveals himself to be Xigbar. To be honest, I don't really mind this. It's a cliffhanger, but I will say that if I had my way, I would have had Maleficent get the box and then open it, and that's how the epilogue ends. I get why it doesn't, but that would have made the box pay off in some way in relation to these two. Overall, the last 2 or 3 hours of the game are some of my favorite for the character interactions, the arc being completed, and overall is one of the best finales I've ever played to any game, let alone a story arc. The game absolutely does things differently, but with the dev time being shortened and the fact that Square couldn't keep its reveals in its pants, put pressure on them to cut corners here and there. However, this game is still a fucking marvel to behold, and the story doesn't leave me wanting even if we discount Remind. Alright, now that that's done, let's look at something that I am sick of hearing about in this series. And I'm sorry, KH2 stans, but I need to say this. Kingdom Hearts 2's story is not as well structured as this game. To start, I think that the 2-visit system works fine, but it gets annoying when I have to come back to finish stuff that could have been taken care of 3 hours ago. Now, I get why this happens. It makes the game longer and the devs only need to move around the models and make different scenarios and then code a boss fight. So good on you there, but its flaws start to show in like Halloween Town or even the Pride Lands. In the first visit of both these worlds, Pete and Maleficent are just fucking with shit and we need to stop them. And in the return visits we have a robot taking presents and Simba feeling sad because Scar's ghost is taunting him. The only reason to do either of these visits is because defeating the experiment gives you Decisive Pumpkin, one of the best Keyblades in the series with honestly my favorite sound effect from KH2. So satisfying. And the Pride Lands gives you Thundaga, which still pisses me off to this day. Other than that, there is no incentive to do these worlds or even Agrabah. At least in Pirates, they made it so that Luxor was fucking with you, so that's something, I guess. The biggest thing is that there is this big disconnect from the player from when Sora finds out that Kairi has been kidnapped and when we actually start doing shit about it. Fuck, 2 is also guilty of the 2-hour series of cutscenes in the middle of the game with little to no gameplay in between them, but because you all grew up with it, you give it a pass. 3 does the exact same thing near the end, but because you all have a stick up your ass, it's suddenly a bad thing? I'm gonna call bullshit. Say what you will about Kingdom Hearts 3, but at least its story makes sense. Sora keeps asking to go help Riku, and Mickey and Donald tell him no because it's too dangerous because he hasn't gotten strong enough yet. I see you in the back, crit level 1 players, but in terms of the story, he hasn't gotten strong enough yet. The plot of the Disney world teaches Sora something about himself, more so in this game than any other. But Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't do this. It's just a scavenger hunt for your friends, and that's it. We look, we cry, we kiss, we fall from the sky, and then we go home. It's just not as engaging as setting up to save the world. Kingdom Hearts 2 has a story that is meant to be a world-spanning hide-and-seek, with the endgame just kinda happening from Sora's end. Yet, it all makes sense. I'm just saying the dissonance is odd. KH3 at least has a straightforward story that wraps up everything in its main plot and its DLC story. Well, besides the obvious thing. Now, when I say the plot is odd, I don't mean it's bad. I love the moment-to-moment cutscenes, and Sora is peak good boy status, but what I'm saying is that a 15-year-old game has had cracks in the polish after so long. Don't get me wrong here, I love the game. I just want to explain where it could have been better in its structure. If I had to change one thing about how the plot of Kingdom Hearts 3 was given to us, or even just ways to make people care about these worlds, I would say my option would be to have the other Guardians of Light go with us to the worlds. The reason I would want this is so that we get more time with them, and overall the way the story is, it's kinda backloaded, which is fine by me because I come for Disney shenanigans and then plot. I don't need the narrative shoved in my face every 5 minutes because this is less important than this mess in the moment because the worlds are in fucking danger. People seem to forget that. The plot is important, but we are brought here for a reason, to protect people. If I could put a guardian in each world, it would be Kyrie in Olympus so Phil could train her. Then we go get Aqua and Ven, let her rest, and bring Ven the toy box. Once Aqua wakes up, we bring her to Corona. Mickey comes to us with Monstropolis because that would be cool. Axel goes to Arendelle because irony, and Riku goes to San Fran to watch Sora scream at a toy car like it's a monster. And I guess Pirates gets to stay the same. Since that world has such a short story, it would be pointless to put anyone there. This fixes a lot of the complaints others have by having the Guardians mean more than they originally did. While I personally could give a fuck about that because the game was fun, and I like how it ended, I'm not one to just shut my brain off and not try to make others happy as best I can by providing a solution. Is it perfect? No, but it gets the job done, and it's at the very least different. The plot of Kingdom Hearts, both on the whole and 3 on its own, is a mess, but if you pay attention and even just go with the flow, then it'll be more of a fun ride. Examining every scene and every line uttered is not fun or easy or worth the time. The journey, the ride that is this game's plot, is what keeps me coming back, even if the cutscenes get kind of bloated towards the end of Act 2. The thing that I think keeps people back from loving this game as much as they could have is that the plot ends on a cliffhanger 3 times, and they assume that everything would have been put to bed in this arc and nothing would carry over to the next one. But the problem with that idea is that this is Tetsuya Zippers and Belts Nomura. He doesn't do self-contained. And to be clear, that is a good thing. See, people wanted this to be like 2 where they just kind of ended all the stuff, but Kingdom Hearts 2 only had 2 prior games to conclude, plus its own story within its own game, and it did that well. However, since then we've had 3 full installments, a fever dream, a mobile game, and a movie to sum up the mobile game. There is just simply more to cover. This story has a plot of its own if you pay attention, mainly in the Disney stuff, but it still has to make references and remind the player of different parts of the prior games so as to not make the long-term fans feel like they were wasting their time. It struck the best middle ground that it possibly could. With the forced announcement and the tight release schedule I mentioned earlier, can you blame the game for lacking something like all of Twilight Town or more Pumini games that you all hate anyway, or Radiant Garden or Cloud being a whiny bitch? Because while those would have been nice to see and might be in a future final mix version of the game, they don't detract from what the game already has. Kingdom Hearts 3 was very clear with what it was, both in its marketing and its story. It gave us a full story that ended damn near 2 decades of plot, left the door open to do so much more with these characters and what little is left to be resolved. And if that's not good storytelling, I don't know what is. Tell me, really, if you didn't care, would you really be this obsessed with the story or made it this far into the video? I don't think so. I don't think so. Wait, hang on, I gotta say something. Before we start this section, I need to make one thing abundantly clear. This DLC is awesome. It's genuinely fun, challenging, and I want to get better at some of its harder aspects. Why are you so hard, you handsome man? However, this did not fix KH3. There was never anything to fix. I think this game is a treat, and I love it to bits. The last hour and a half couldn't have told you that already. So while yes, this is a good DLC, it didn't make the game suddenly good. It simply elevated it to the standard of KH2 Final Mix. Although I'd argue that the base game was already that with the addition of crits, or having 0 XP available on all difficulties, but I digress. Now that that's done, let us press on. A year after the base game launched and a few updates to fix bugs that popped up over the course of the year, the team released an update that came with a few things of note. The first are the Oathkeeper and Oblivion, and like 7 abilities that make the game snappier and more like KH2 combat. Honest to God, love the way combat feels when these things are turned on because they add so much, and the 2 Keyblades are really fun too. The only downside is I wish that Oblivion had received a palette swap for double form due to the way the Keyblades are held and the outfit itself, because as it stands now, he just summons the Oathkeeper and switches the Oblivion to his other hand out of sheer laziness. Now, double form with Oathkeeper is really nice, and it makes sense, which leads me to believe they had made double form for just Oathkeeper in mind, and then made Oblivion usable in the game since they already had programmed the thing, so why not? It's not bad, in fact, I love the damn thing, but I just wish they'd taken the time to add that small detail to make Oblivion stand out more when compared to Oathkeeper. In any case, those were free for just updating the game, which I'm like 90% sure they only gave you those because Roxas has both of them, and they have the collision programmed as is, and thus they only had to make 3 forms. Dark form, its palette swap light form, and then double form. So, I mean, I love them, but it just seems a tad shady. They also changed some endgame stuff in the cutscenes, made the Nominate cutscene unskippable, and honestly the only 2 scenes I want to touch on are the Days Trio scene and the Summoning Kingdom Hearts scene. In the Days scene, the only thing I noticed was that they made the lasers hitting Axel much more, well, more. They're quicker, hit harder, and just look more damaging, so that's cool. But they also changed the scene where Xehanort summons Kingdom Hearts, and for some reason they removed the clouds. Haha, ironic, I know. And while I like the colors and the sky is fucking beautiful, I don't know, something about the clouds being there in their most dire moment made it feel more impactful. I mean, I get why they're gone after you beat Old Man Wrinkles, but still. Also, they got rid of my meteor shower, and that makes me sad. Oh, also they fixed some textures on Goofy and Riku's face, along with the lighting looking a hell of a lot better in the ending CG, and I gotta say, looks good. However, the update came with the DLC called Remind, and the Limit Cut episode along with the Secret episode tucked within it. The first of these 3 I'll cover in a moment, but let's talk about the Limit Cut and the Secret Boss since they're so short. So the Limit Cut episode is basically this conversation outside of Hollow Bastion in KH2. That's really what it boils down to. Yes, there is more going on, like Terra and Riku having this gem of a conversation, then is a cute little short bean who I want to hug until his eyes pop out. I mean, look at this pure boy. He's just the shortest and I love him for it. Then their armor sets being shown for a brief period of 2 seconds before disappearing into the void, which, side note, why is the void always purple? The entirety of the Final Fantasy cameos in one scene, and that's kind of it. Kairi's in a coma again. Naminé isn't even mentioned, even though she was super important in Remind. The Disney trio are going into past worlds we've already been to, which if that and the Birth by Sleep trio in the Realm of Darkness aren't an interluding game, I'm gonna break a Keyblade over Nomura's head. And the gang in Twilight Town are looking at computers. Again. The bulk of the Limit Cut episode is that of the Data Org fights. Yep, we're bringing these things back. Now, out of all the fights, I'd say my favorite is either probably young Xehanort, Vanitas, or even Riku, because they're just straight up Keyblade fights with no real gimmick to them. Something that I hate about the Data fights overall is the fact that aside from Roxas and KH2, they all have some sort of gimmick. Xaldin had that stupid windshield that ate your health bar like it was a cracker, and the learn command that you had to cheese in order to beat him. Luxord had his stupid games that are back in this one, but are way easier to understand, thank God. Marluxia has his bullshit counter, only this time it counts down so quickly. Like, it isn't even a hit counter, it's a timer that's sped up, and I hate it. The only 2 that I think are justified in being this bullshit are Xion and Old Man Xehanort, as they are only unlocked after beating the other 11 of them, and they are true tests of skill, even on beginner. I do appreciate this little touch that if you lose your health bar, like, they deplete the number of hit points you have overall because of these weird blue beans. Normally, you have to wait out the timer until it gets back, and then you can heal. But if you have a form change on standby, you can make it come back to full, then heal so that you're not wasting your precious MP. Also save at least 8 elixirs for Christmas Eyes here, because this fucker requires them. Everyone else can be dealt with high potions and high ethers. Just a tip. Also, did you know you could buy elixirs from this Moogle? It's a godsend. I will say, the remix themes are fucking lit, and honest to God, my favorite is Luxord's. I don't know why, but the violins just have this dangerous feeling, but also like you could dance to it. Like the rhythm is meant to get you in the groove of playing his game. Like that one bit at the start of the chorus just, I love it. The fights overall are really fun. Yes, they are bullshit to learn, but so is every other super boss in the series. I appreciate the challenge, but I think toning down the attack speed by like 25% would have gotten the job done pretty well. And then there's the cutscene that is just total confusion of the fairy fucking godmother asking Riku about his dreams about Sora. Suck it, Kairi fans. Score 1 for my boys. I love this cutscene, but oh God, does it make me giggle whenever I see it. And then there's the super secret boss, and if I'm being honest, I love it. It's so hard, but so satisfying to beat, and I think that comes down to the lack of actual guides like there are for Lingering Will, and the lighting in this fight is just so annoying since it's all dark on dark clothes. Say what you will about the Lingering Will, and I certainly have, but the lighting at least lets me see my ass get kicked. Also, fuck this move where you can steal your Keyblade. That is just nonsense. The secret ending is also really underwhelming, even if you beat him. Like, yeah, it's so beautiful I cry at its perfection, but I mean, it's really short, so pfft. Okay, so now the main reason we all bought the DLC, the time-traveling retelling of events at the climax, but with more context and crying. The thing that this DLC did really well was giving us fights we wanted and more character interactions that we all wanted for years, to the point I think I heard a collective nut bust on the 24th across the globe. And oh lord, the Mickey scene. I mean, what can you say about this? It's so over the top. I mean, just look at this. Goddamn. I love this DLC. It's very short if you cut the cutscenes out, and you don't die, you'll get through it in like 20 minutes. And that's if you know where all the pieces in Scala are. If not, you're kind of just wandering around for a while. That's not to say it's bad. The Master of Masters is hilarious as always. The cutscenes are really great, like in almost every instance in this series. The fights and the interactions with all the new team attacks are extremely fun on top of all that. The only one that I thought needed one and didn't get it was the Riku fight. Sora and Mickey get one called Volley Shot, which is hilariously adorable to activate, and the finisher harkens back to Chain of Memories, which is always fun. The Seesaw Trio get one called Thinking of You, and the dialogue for the finisher is actually different depending on if you're attacking Saïx or Xemnas. Aqua and Ven have one called Ice Lighter, which is really spectacular to look at, and is funny how much thought went into how Ven would ride his Keyblade like his hover bike. That's just adorable. Mickey, Sora, and Riku have True End, essentially Trinity Limits, which just nukes the floor. Fucking Aqua and Axel have one during the Keyblade Warrior group fight, and Sora and Kairi have this stupid wing attack that has like, what, the 5 times they spent together on the feathers? Like, everyone has one, but the 2 who would have benefited for it. Well, I guess Sora and Aqua and Sora and Ven don't have one, but you get my point. Other than that, my only complaint is that the non-Sora characters are locked at a specific level with specific stats, and it's super annoying. I get the stats, you gotta have characters have specific abilities and things like that, but why don't they scale to Sora's level? The DLC tracks your level, so if you enter it at level 99, then you'll be at level 99. I mean, I think just doubling their attack and defense would do the trick, but maybe that's just me? That's on critical though. On standard, it's much fairer and a lot less frustrating. The quick select is preset, and I really wish you could at least change that if you die so it's a lot less cumbersome. The plot is very simple. Surprisingly, Sora wants to go save his bland piece of paper with ketchup on it, and dies in the end. That's about it. However, in the process, we play as both Riku and Aqua again, with Roxas thrown in for fun. I like playing as Riku and Aqua, but I would have killed to play as Ven or even Axel. I mean, you programmed in the combos and all that shit, so why not just make them playable? You could even use the same shot lock for them and it would make sense. Just make Ven's green and you're done. The story structure gives you context for things like where the fuck the Lingering Will went after he ex-machina Donald from pulling a sudden death beam. The idea and execution is solid, and I feel more for the characters than I did in the initial fights. You know, that's fun. However, Nomura had to go and over-explain something, and that's the fucking X's in all the organization's names. So, he retconned the connection between the Seesaw Trio to be the X, or Key Sigil, in all of their names, which explains why Lee wanted to go by Axel in a weird meta way, even though in Dream Drop Distance he explicitly said that he wanted to go by Lee, but whatever. Anyway, he made the X's literal, like in the sense that it's their actual heart bond, and it's both touching and stupid at the same time, and I love it. I don't get why you had to over-explain that one thing, but again, it's cute. There are some moments that are kinda retconned also, like how Sora just shows up with the fight in Axel and Kairi and she gets kidnapped immediately. Now it turns out that both he and Kairi were caged, knocked out, and now we have a solo fight with Saïx and Xemnas. Then Sora wakes up, Kairi gets kidnapped, and then we kill Saïx. So that's neat. Small stuff like Aqua seeing the shadows as anti-Aquas, explaining why she just got swooshed in the base game helps flesh things out, and I appreciate the attention to detail. Little side note here, because I have nowhere else to put this, but can we talk about the group Keyblade wielder fight that is so over the top and cool? Because my god, is this an awesome mini game, and I wish there was more of it. Like, I love it already, but if we got to choose the situation combo between a lot of different combinations of characters, I'd be way happier. Then we get this fucking badass scene with Mickey that makes me cry and care and feel things, and the music is so touching. Oh, and the shooting light into keyholes thing is awesome, and KH2 stands just busted a nut at this, I can tell. Also, random thing, stop saying Riku is bland in this scene. Think about it. He's been doing the looking for Sora thing for a year. He's numb, and explaining this thing to the Final Fantasy crew must be like the 50th time he's had to explain this to someone. Or, again, he's just numb from his boyfriend fading right before his eyes. It makes sense. Stop saying it's bad. I'd like you to say something like that in a peppy voice after your significant other has been missing for a year and you're still looking for them. Anyway, back to the plot dissection. I will say the whole heart transference connection plot is really interesting. It even explains what the fuck young Xehanort was talking about when he gets swished away by darkness. I don't really get why we needed all this backstory or interplay, but again, it's fun to see. I'm not someone who needs the lore or the story explained to me explicitly to get what's going on, and Remind does and doesn't do this a lot. So the thing with Lingering Will and what the hell happened to Kairi are needed to make the plot make sense, but the X's in the names is just stupid and needlessly literal. But the happy middle ground is the Aqua Shadow shot and the young Xehanort line. See, since young Xehanort told Sora he'd pay the price in San Francisco, it now makes sense that he would sense the time-traveling energy from past Sora, since time-traveling Sora is in him at that moment, so he'd feel it and be a cocky dick about it. Small stuff like that makes things so much clearer, and it did it without any more over-explaining than, oh fuck, we're time traveling and that's literally his gimmick to get it. Or even old man Xehanort explaining what brought him back when Ansem and Xemnas were ganked and not Terranort because of multiple hearts and bodies and souls and wills and yada yada yada. It's not that important, just a cool explanation that helps us understand everything. The best way I can explain how I enjoyed this series is I got the gist, because that's all I need. Also, can I just say this character has had a rough go in terms of voice actors? First, he had the awesomeness that is Leonard Nimoy, and I'm like 90% sure they intended the pairing of him and Mark Hamill to be ironic for a number of reasons I'm not gonna list out because meta jokes. Then he dies in early 2015, gets replaced by Rutger Hauer in the base game, then he dies in July of 2019, and has now been replaced with Christopher Lloyd. I mean, Jesus heart-shaped moon Christ! I think we have a candidate for the new Superman paradox, in which an actor who plays the character will die shortly thereafter. In any case, it's a bit jarring to go from Howard to Lloyd with no real notice or even a memoriam screen in the game, but I kinda get why. He only had like 20 minutes of dialogue, so I get it. The problem with Lloyd wasn't so much his voice, it was his delivery. I haven't heard him act since the mid-90s, but by God, does it sound like he's trying to do a Doc Brown impression the whole time. Like, he repeats lines that Hauer had nailed, and it's just jarring. It's not bad, far from it, but I get the feeling they didn't have a lot of time for retakes, since Lloyd was probably brought in the last minute to record his lines, and they had to get him out the door, so whatever was the best take at the moment. Say what you will about Hauer, but aside from this one scripted line from the final boss that always makes me laugh, he gave the character the gravitas he deserved.
Come, Kingdom Hearts!
Why does he sound like he's asking for more rice pudding? Anyway, Lloyd just sounds off. Not bad, just a tad off kilter if you get what I'm meaning. Also, him saying enlighten me in his data fight is equally hilarious.
Enlighten me!
Speaking of old man Xehanort, let's talk about the girl he fridged. The whole Kairi plot is just needless to me, but everything else around it is really fun. Maybe if you played as Kairi looking for Sora, it would be different since we would see it from her point of view. But as it stands, we replay old fights, get a really awesome scene with Mickey, and look for Kairi. And the boss fight in which she's playable is just cool, I can't even deny that. Although, she has terrible animations. Not that they're badly done or anything, but I mean, come on. If she wanted to prove herself, or even if the staff wanted to make her seem like less of a helpless, frightened little girl, they could have made the barrier like awkward where she's certain it's gonna work. The mid-air block is the same, the dodges are the same, she just looks helpless and it's distracting as all hell. Even her combat animations are weak looking. The only reason she looks powerful is because she can teleport, which is only here because she's only in one fight and that's it. For God's sake, whenever she throws her Keyblade, she says the phrase, please work, over and over again. Like, bitch, you were in a hyperbolic time chamber for what must have been days if you go by the fact that most of the worlds take place over the course of a whole day, or several days in the case of Corona and San Francisco. You should have more confidence than this. For fuck's sake, you learned how to teleport and do a buzzsaw attack with a Keyblade, without a form change or a drive form. Sora himself hasn't figured that out yet. Aqua, the mage user, the requisite magic woman, hasn't gotten that down yet. But you still have to pray that this will work, and you act like this? Get your shit together, you whiny, bitchy waste of a plotline. I hate this character. I've never hidden that from anyone, but I really did try to give her a chance in this fight. But nope, she lived up to my expectation of being able to hit the boss, and that's about it. In almost every other category, she let me down in some way. I've said this since Kairi was shown to be playable. One boss fight where you were inflicting damage as her does not erase 18 years of bad characterization, nor does it a good character make. Switching to a more neutral topic, the fast passes and black card modes. I absolutely love these. They were fun additions to the game that I wasn't expecting when the DLC dropped. And surprisingly enough, I like the black codes more than I like the fast passes. I know, fucking weird, right? The main reason is the same reason I understand why people like Lingering Will. The masochistic feeling of triumphing over such a massive challenge is one of the best feelings. The first few worlds were easy to do with all codes on. The only code I turned off for King of Toys was, I think, Shot Locks, and for Marshmallow I think it was Zero Defense. From there I kept the battle items off, and that carried me pretty much to the end. High Potions were the real MVP of this route, I swear to God. What I like about the pro codes is that you can basically do a level 1 run with base stats, but still get useful abilities that make the game worth trudging through. I got the Risk Taker achievement at the baseline score of 365,000. By the way, take off Falling Slash. It fucks with your attack timing real hard, I found out. Just for the data fights though, everywhere else is pretty much fine, but in the data fights it really fucks with you and I hate it. Also gear. Keep all your gear. You have no idea how much easier it makes fights like Ansem because all of his DM attacks have status ailments. So all the clasps like the Snowman, Umbrella, Fire Hat, and even the Mask one if you feel like you can dodge the Freeze Claws are super needed here. If you're wanting to farm for money because selling shit didn't help, get the gold amulet in the babies and toddlers section of Toy Box, go to one of the level 0 battle gates in the Key Lake Graveyard and just kill everything. I ended up having to do 11 out of 13 data fights, and in most cases I had 6 high potions and 2 high ethers. Some of the fights, like Ansem, Riku, Sayax, and Marluxia, didn't really require it, mainly due to blocking, which by the way, please turn on MP recovery, or MP block, or whatever the fuck the thing is. So more high potions were helpful there. If you went the route I did, in total you'll need about 66 high potions and 22 high ethers. Well, less if you just want a flawless Luxor because he is by far the easiest in this mode. I beat most of them with only battle items turned off, and a few here and there with zero defense, to the point I didn't need to fight Xion or Xehanort. I just got the score at, I think Marluxia was my last one. As a sort of side note, these codes are akin to critical mode to me. I saved that for now because I feel like this is where it applies the best. Critical mode is the hardest difficulty setting in the series, and in most cases, it's a decent ramp up and challenge, particularly in early game. Every title has had it added in a re-release of that game. The sole exceptions are Kingdom Hearts 1, which doesn't have crit, but Proud is also really tough in that game, Chain of Memories, which is just a clone of Kingdom Hearts 1 with cards, and Dream Drop Distance, which had that on release if I remember correctly, although you did have to unlock it by beating the base game. In Kingdom Hearts 3's case, it was added a little less than 3 months after the game was dropped, and frankly, I like it. But I think it's a bit of an overcorrection because in Beginner, Standard, and Proud, your HP and MP are the same, so that's why it feels like the same level of difficulty on all 3, because the only thing to change is the boss/enemy damage output. I think if they had tweaked Proud mode so that you only have like 2/3 of your MP and HP, it made the enemies hit like 12% harder, we would have been fine. On crit though, they flat out doubled the enemy damage and cut both your MP and HP in half, which, fine, fair enough, but I think giving us 60 health and like 80 magic would have made things a tad more manageable. The one good thing crit did, besides the ramp up in difficulty, was that it had several abilities that got rid of attractions and small stuff like that, which also makes your situation commands feel faster than if the ability was turned off, which to me reads, you wanted these things gone? Here you go. And if you don't want to use those, then you can use the actual cool stuff faster, which I appreciate because, again, in crit they made situation commands take longer to happen. So to me it's a win-win all around. Black card mode makes it so that you can turn on any and everything right from the word go. So if you don't like a mechanic, then you can turn it off on any difficulty. Honestly, 10 out of 10 if you're someone like me who wants a challenge, but enough magic, health, and abilities to back it up. The easy codes are fun, but more so in a different way. See, with the black codes made you rely on skill and timing to get things done, with the easy codes you become an unkillable god. Because if you have second chance and what's more equipped, then you'll literally never die, because HP regen keeps you from staying at 1 health for those more problematic fights. Hell, the only time I did die in the game was when I was running around Arendelle grinding to level 48 to get second chance because I had Survivor on, and I just kept getting one-shotted. It was weird. See, where the black codes restricted you, the easy codes make it so that you have an easier time. I know, foreign concept. This is honestly what I call a speedrun playthrough because I cleared the game in like 13 hours. And I was at level 99 too. The only one I didn't turn on for boss fights was Deadly Blow, because it was just boring to go into room after room after room and just one-shot things. At least with Survivor on, you had to hit them a dozen or so times. To compensate for the lack of challenge, the devs made these tests to overcome that are unlocked throughout the game called merits. Some, like the Gigas and Bowling merits, are world-specific, and some are just go with what you feel. If you're looking for the Rage one and haven't beaten the game, I always get it in Olympus when you're chasing the Lich. The air combo one I got in Olympus during the Rock Titan fight, the freeze one I got in the Olympus Battlegate up where Zeus is. God, why is Olympus so helpful here? Anyway, oh, I got the Link one by using Ariel in the Endless Swarm fight in the Keyblade Graveyard, and can I just say, this is gorgeous after you finish. I mean, look at all that water, it's so pretty. This is why Ariel is best summon. The ship in the middle of the second zone was tricky to get an A rank on, but really, just focus on the discs when you whittle the big ship down to 1 health bar, and never stop firing. If you let go, the little rockets will home in and kill the big ship. It's a slog. And lastly, we come to the most infamous merit in the game, the Skywalker Challenge. And honestly, I don't get why this is so hard. I beat it in 2 tries. Not 2 tries this go around, I mean period. I'd literally never attempted this before making this video, and I wanted to just see what would happen, hence why I got the achievement when I beat it. I would have gotten it on my first try, but I landed further from a wall than I thought, and I failed. But the second time was flawless. Sure, I couldn't see because all these damn trees were in my way, but hey, I got it. I loved doing this run. It was so cathartic to stick it to the bosses who gave me so much pain in the Pro Codes run. Hell, I beat all but one of the Data Ore fights my first try with them on, and barely any armor. In fact, I only used 1 item, and that was on Sora, and it was a high potion. And for those of you who are wondering, here's how I rank them on my Kingdom Key only standard run, although Psyx does get bumped down a peg or 2, now that I know that there's a medal that gives you stun protection. Here's how I rated them on my Pro Codes, at least the ones I fought. Here's the easy code ranking, and here's the crit one. Oh wait, there isn't a one, because no, I refuse. This is just bullshit.
No, stop, you can't make me, Dad!
Remind on the whole is a fun time. The actual Remind, Limika episode, and Secret Boss are all hard in their own right, but still a fun kind of challenge if you're into that. For me, standard, beginner, and even proud of feeling brave are more than fine enough. I would say go buy this if you haven't, or wait for a price drop for the next couple of weeks. Either way, Remind is super fun and well worth the purchase. The orchestra videos you get if you buy the $40 version are really nice too. I think for $10, some awesome orchestra music videos that make the game what it is a pretty damn good price. Also, this woman's face when she's playing Lazy Afternoon is fucking hilarious. Like she's going, bitch, if you don't let me take a breath, I'm gonna shove this flute up your ass. Love the conductor's outfit too. It's so fucking good. Seriously though, guys, if you felt the base game was boring, try this out. You might like it. It didn't remind me of how much I love this game or show me the secrets of how good it is. More like it pushed me to the cutting edge of my limits.
I feel so metropolitan. Cosmopolitan? Ooh. I gotta tell Riku what a blast this place is.
Oh, he's so precious. Sora is honestly the single best character this series has ever brought into my life. The reason for this is that, well, in most other cases, the typical anime shogun protagonist is a broody, angsty, Vanitas-like character with a tragic backstory. Think Dante, but without the snark. And the great thing about Sora is that he has none of that shit. Seriously, the worst thing that has happened to him is that the story has paired him with a character that has less definition than my arms. I love this pure boy for his overall presentation and personality. But if we look at everything around him, like his combat, team attacks, and reactions to things, he gets even better. Sora, as a character, has been through a lot. He's had his friends get kidnapped, swallowed by darkness, and fridged for the sake of motivating him. He himself has had his memories erased, been Metroided several times, ordered around by a duck, a dog, and a mouse who seriously needs to learn what communication means, And still, he smiles and jokes and plays with new friends and old ones like nothing's wrong. He has moments of being a normal kid, even with the scenario he's found himself in, and after Kingdom Hearts 1, he just rolls with it with no real questions because this is his life now, so who cares about the logistics besides the initial shock of the more startling transformations? Something people give Sora a lot of flack for is that he's kinda dumb. But of course he is. He was raised mostly alone on an island with his boyfriend, and then later some randos from the main island who came over for a playdate to steal him from his man. The heretics. So yeah, he's kinda slow on the uptake. It comes with the territory. I think his tech illiteracy is one of the funniest things in the series because he just doesn't get how to use a computer, so he smacks it till calculators pop up, thinks his cell phone is a brick, and can't fucking count. I love this pure boy, bless his oblivious soul. Combat-wise, I get the feeling the form changes are more the doing of Sora, more so than the Keyblade itself. The reason I believe this is because they're forged from memories, so it makes sense that Sora would see toys running around and turn a sword into a cactus with a sheriff's bat sticking out of it, into a giant rocket-propelled hammer, and then to a giant fuck-me drill hammer that can do this as a combo finisher.
Here we go! See ya!
Haha, goddamn. There are just different ways to approach combat, and I get the feeling that he would want to spice things up, or rely on the memories from his Keyblade to just do his old tricks out of muscle memory. The shot locks also play a role in this, since all of them are different, and they have different variations depending on if they're fully charged or not, which is at least more interesting than Rainbow Prism or whatever the fuck Riku's knockoff is. I'm not saying these are bad, far from it. Riku's especially was a fun surprise, but they're just the same thing, albeit recolored, and it's just not as engaging as, oh, I don't know, shooting through the fabric of reality to smack demons with a drill. Can you guys tell that I really love Favorite Deputy? Cause ooh boy does that thing get mileage when I use it. Side note, because I have nowhere else to put this, but I love how when you're traversing worlds and are just running in a given direction, you start at a pace similar to KH2, and then Sora just fucking books it because of how big the worlds are. It's small, but it really does make things so much easier to deal with. Something I found interesting was that you can equip or unequip the fusion abilities with Donald and Goofy. The reason this struck me as different was because that could have honestly been something you put on those two that is outside of Sora's direct control, but I get the feeling the devs wanted to put everything cool in the player's direct control as possible so as to minimize the confusion or the what the fuck factor. Shout out to Antiform. I like this, and more of a streamlined idea of how to go about combat and not be boring as piss as they pull a Pokemon and teach you how to move your muscles to begin maybe considering the possibility to walk 2 steps before they get into the really heavy stuff, like raising your arm. No, here are the tools, figure out what works best for you. The team attacks seem to come from the other characters' own minds, but I like the overall fact that they can't do this alone and need him to finish this idea to its completion. Like, Donald is a skilled mage, but he still needs Sora's help to pull off this god tier of an attack without flat out killing himself in the process like with Zeta Flare. Flow motion also applies to this, seeing as you can just basically leave it alone and never use it until you get the super jump ability, which makes traversal so much easier. And I mean, look at this gut punch of a jump. It's so goofy and it fits him to a T, I love it. Sora is a character that makes his mark by making connections with people and not letting those connections go unmentioned. Because he likes making new friends, and the way the story is set up, he can't just bring them all along on every adventure, because that would fuck with the fabric of the universe. From a story perspective, Sora has always been exactly what he needed to be, a happy kid who comes in to help those in need by reacting to the situation. There's a reason Sora is a voiced character and isn't silent or even just having dialogue options. He is his own person, this is his story, and you're controlling him through it. One thing that has always bugged me is that people want him to suffer and lose that happy smile and to be, well, Zora. A dark, brooding protagonist who speaks in mysterious one-liners that means fuck all to the moment because we don't have context for what it means, and to that I say no. Sora is a happy person. Those are allowed to exist in the story and be the main character. He gets mad, he gets upset, he has moments of unease, and is someone who is at least interesting to follow. I mean, look at this. Look at the first scene that plays when you enter the cooking minigame.
Is the food ready yet? Huh? He hasn't started? Huh? Whoa, hold on! Hey! Oh no! Oh, whoa! Would you... You're gonna make me cook?
That is one of the cutest things in the game, and is simultaneously the most Japanese moment Sora has ever had. That's not necessarily good or bad, it's more just a simple observation. Regardless, it's dumb and cute and it's great. The way the Disney worlds are set up in most games outside of Kingdom Hearts 1 is that Sora needs to learn something or simply protect the world from darkness. They don't have to be super relevant, they just have to be fun and not boring to get through. Some fail, a lot succeed, and the rest just kind of fall in the middle for me. Which is fine, seeing as it makes the ones that really slap the hardest and leave that nice juicy handprint behind. Yeah, that's a metaphor, shut up. Sora as a character does not need to be that complex or even really just that in-depth. He's happy, he has emotions, and wants to make friends. That's all you need in a game where Disney characters are half the focus. Like, I feel that people forget that a lot of the time. Seeing as the original plot has gotten so far up its ass at this point, it might as well be a narcissist, but in reality, Kingdom Hearts has always made the Disney worlds a selling point. Yes, there is an original plot that ties all of this together and makes the player care why we're saving these characters we love, but honestly, they could have just done the epic Mickey thing of having the monster that's causing all of this be a giant Heartless, and it keeps making little minions to fuck shit up and make people fall into despair, and that's why we have to stop it, and I would have been completely fine with it. But because the plot is the way it is, and so many characters in the story are sad or mopey or just a straight up bitch, it really helps to have a grounded character like Sora to make the story not be as melodramatic as it could be if he wasn't there. One thing I've only seen like 3 people talk about, most notably King K, is the lessons the Disney worlds teach Sora, and I think that's important to touch on. I won't go through all of them, but I'll pick one per game, just to be fair. In Kingdom Hearts 1, Olympus teaches him how he can be a true hero by relying on his friends, something the rest of the series loves to drill home. In 2, he learns what it means to be a pirate by honoring the rules, even if they fuck you over. In Birth by Sleep, Ven learns from Jacques and Cinderella how to be good friends by helping one another achieve their dreams, even if you get nothing out of it. In Coded, Data Sora finds the true meaning of love. Finds out about the many forms friends can take, even if one of them is just Data. Country Musketeers has him learn how to approach things from a new perspective, which I'm like 90% sure led to the form changes in his mind. Days teaches Roxas what it means to have friends. 0.2 and Back Cover are just lore dumps, so there really is no real lesson to be learned here other than the simple yet powerful message of you're not alone in this fight. You have allies, be they friends or guild members. Huh, never thought I'd make a fairy tale reference in this script, but here we are. And 3, well, take your pick. Learning how he has to find strength from within, how hearts can be connected even if they're far apart, how to be brave in the face of imminent danger that you've never come across, how laughing or looking on the bright side can make things better, how amazing Let It Go is, and that he should totally buy Frozen 1 and 2 this holiday season, coming at you live in Walmart for $35.45. What the heart of a pirate means to him, how to think around the problem, and how far he and Riku have come since Kingdom Hearts 1. There are so many reasons the Disney worlds matter, and they all tie into our main lead. Summons even play into Sora's character in a way, seeing as he is the one that summons them and guides them into helping us. The idea is that summons are lost souls whose worlds have fallen to darkness. Well, they used to, now they're just cool to look at, I guess. Thus, we give them something to do while we fix the bullshit that has been wrought by Xehanort. Sure, it's a tiny thing, but I like to think the devs kept the idea that you would work together in tandem to achieve your goals. Winnie the Pooh even plays into this. Sora has been gone for like 5 minutes, and still Pooh is just like, hey man, I miss you bunches, give me some food and we're good in the wood. Like, he just doesn't care, he just misses Sora. Sora is just so special to the people that he comes across that he's actively missed if he's gone for too long, and if that's not the mark of a good character, then I have no idea what is. Music is very important here too. He has Sora's Sacrifice from Kingdom Hearts 1, which is just Dearly Beloved, only in a higher octave. Then you have his theme from Kingdom Hearts 2, which is loud, bombastic, and overall just Sora. It flows, it ebbs, it has this nice beat to it that doesn't get annoying at all, and it perfectly sums up the character. In Kingdom Hearts 3, he gets a slightly lower range theme, which I'm totally down for in this case, because of how the story works. And then for a cute tongue-in-cheek thing, they also made a ringtone version of it for the Gummy Phone, and it's so adorable and it fits it perfectly. One last thing I want to touch on about Sora before we end this massive video is his connections. First, there's the obvious, that of Riku, Kairi, Donald, and Goofy. These 4 are what I would call Sora's staples. They are the constants, they are forever on his mind, and they always stick with him. When they're not getting kidnapped, fridged, or knocked out by a cold breeze. Why are you the best out of the trash brigade, you edgy fuck? The whole thing with these 5 is that they are 2 sets of friends that have merged, and Honestly, I want to see more of these people talking and interacting. Ditto with the whole cast. But we've got time for that in the games to come. For one connection I've always liked, and have used time and again to prove how interesting and wholesome Sora is his tether to Ven and Vanitas. So we all know that as a heart, before he was even born, Sora fixed Ven's heart, and that gave rise to Vanitas looking like Sora, thus giving Ven a whole heart to function with as a person. Vanitas looking like Sora, to me, is one of the more interesting ideas, and that is the fact that he really shouldn't, but does because Nomura likes parallels, and the fact that Vanitas probably looked like a heartless vessel, so a mannequin, until that moment. And holy hell does he go ham on that voice acting. If I could have one wish, I'd kill for the chance to see Riku Replica's hammy ass, young Xehanort and Vanitas' hammy ass interact, because I am in the mood for some Canadian bacon on a fucking mountain of cheese, my dude. Holy hell, that's gonna be fun. Haley Joel Osment is a godsend to this franchise, and I hope he continues playing this boy the way he has until he's old man Xehanort's age, because that is the shit I live for. Sora's strength is his heart. It always has been, and to me, that is what it will always be. We can calculate damage output or magic or his defense stat, but to me, how he treats others, connects with them, and makes things right by those people are the things that matter the most, because at the end of the day, that's all he needs. I mean, there's a reason this part of the final boss made us cheer, right? Sora isn't a flawless character, but he's, well, there's no other way to put it. He's perfectly imperfect. You know, I was sitting here for a long time trying to think of what really bothers me about this game, or even the series as a whole. And while I have a lot of niggling problems, I honestly can't find anything wrong that makes me groan or even get upset with, other than Kairi. Kairi is the single thing that sours this series. I could accept a lot of bullshit in my story. If the characters involved run with it, I'd even have a lot of fun with the concept. The time travel plotline doesn't bother me because I know the reason it was added was to get old man Xehanort into the present without him dying off of old age, but also not having the chance to complete his goals because of Ansem and Xemnas failing. It's a meta reason, but it still makes sense, and the infamous line of Xigbar going, "I'm already half Xehanort," is just ridiculous, and I can't get enough of that. Xion bothers me because I think she has the personality of Paste, but at least she's important. There are scenes of her and her boyfriends talking, joking, exploring the worlds together. Hell, the boss fight of her is still impactful, even in cutscene form. But Kairi is the biggest blight on the series because out of all the main cast, she is the least developed and is still heaped praise on by both fans and the story for doing the bare minimum, and to that I say, I want better. I want to like her. I want a game where we spend time as Kairi and see things play from her point of view. But so far, she's been underused, and that's why she's my least favorite character in the main cast. She just has so little going on that it drives me up a wall to the nth degree. The rest of the series is fine though. Yes, KH1 is slow, yes, Chain of Memories is boring and only has like 3 characters worth caring about in its cast. Kingdom Hearts 2 is a godsend among games, although it has issues that go unaddressed that I've sprinkled in here and there. Birth by Sleep is really melodramatic and likes to take its time doling out the plot, Days wanted backstory for 2 boyfriends, and then was forced to add a girl in for fear of the gays, and yes, that is true. Coded wanted to give context to Mickey's letter, 0.2 wanted to give context for Aqua, Back Cover wanted to give context to the black box, the Keyblade War, and whoever the fuck this kid is, and Dream Drop Distance wanted to give setup to 3, which it did very well. All of these games have flaws that I could list out in great detail if I wanted to, but I don't. I really don't want to do that, because those flaws cease to matter when we get moments like this.
Sora, do you even know how to get to the Realm of Darkness?
Well, Riku and the King do.
Yeah, those moments make up for so much of this.
Back at you.
Surrender to it!
Back at you. Yeah. Nice.
Return to nothing forever.
Because story and gameplay go hand in hand to me, which if the story is enjoyable enough, I will muscle through some iffy gameplay, no questions asked. One example of really fun gameplay but has a story that I could just not care about is Jedi Fallen Order. I really wanted to like this one, I really did try, but the story just didn't matter after the inciting incident. Like, I don't care about the galaxy or the fate of this woman's Padawans or anything going on here. Yes, Cal's space dad got murdered, but it didn't have the closeness feeling of an adopted dad and his son, and the son is wanting revenge. It just feels like he was okay with everything. Yes, he has moments of anger and wants to kill the Sith responsible for it, but the rest of the time it's just, hey, let's go talk to this dead guy. Then he wants us to go on a fetch quest. Oh no, the Wookiees are in danger. Let's go on a Walker joyride. Which, I'll admit, the Walker section was pretty lit, but I just could not give a damn about anything else because you're just a blip in the universe. While the conflict is personal, no one acts angry or happy or sad. They just feel like stock characters pulled from a hat. Plucky kid with a knack for what you're currently doing and is an all-around cool dude that nothing bothers? Check. Old wise black mentor with a traumatic past but the personality of sandpaper? Check. Sassy pilot driver sidekick with a weirdly specific hobby like botany? Checkaroony. They're all done to death and I hate it. The characters should be a vehicle for the plot, not the other way around. The plot should happen based on what the characters decide to do and react to the situation they've been presented, not feel like they're going through the oddly captured motions. Kingdom Hearts has its archetypes, but because you play or spend a large amount of time with these characters, they all change and grow and become more than just the dumb one, the loner, the girl, the stoic, the brooding one, the clone, the stick up the ass, and the sassy one. They become such big, bold characters that have personality to them. I love almost every character, because the villains are fleshed out enough and have more than one cutscene between them. Well, some at least. Sorry man, you truly are the weakest link. To make them feel real enough to want to see them die. The main cast are all really funny and wacky kids that all interact so naturally and so easily that I can believe these guys would want to go hang out when this is all done and eat at a diner or just play some games or talk, because that's what you do with friends. And if nothing else, these people have all become friends from this experience, and these, 2 or 3 years in their lives have shaped who they are and who they will become later on. Some were angry and then realized they were wrong, some just sat on the sidelines and did nothing and are still the best wifey for some odd reason. But most of all, some stuck with us. Some stayed together through all the bullshit. The relationships are what really brought us to this moment, where it all ends and Old Man Forehead Veins is put down like Old Yeller, and we all cheered for it. I wanted to talk about my favorite moments from every game, and the reason for that is I want to drill home what I believe is the core of the series, and that's charm. So before we get fully done, let me list out the moments that have stuck with me for one reason or another. I'm limiting myself to 2 per game just to make things fair. The sole exceptions are Days, Coded, and 0.2, and that's because while they are fine, it's hard to pick 2 per game, so they'll just get 1 apiece. KH1, Funny Face Special, and Stabbing Himself for Kairi. Chain of Memories gets the moment where he talks to Naminé, and Riku just fucking bodying Lexius. KH2 has the moment where Sora finds Riku, and when Sora and Riku just sit and talk. Also, this Tron scene makes me giggle and cry in the span of 2 seconds. So, yay. Birth by Sleep has the flashback where Terra says the Oath of Taking, and then Vanitas just flailing for the Keyblade. Days has Axel give Roxas ice cream, and yet hates it, and then keeps on eating it. That's just cute. Code 8 has the scene of Donald and Goofy saving Digi-Sora, Dream Drop Distance has the moment when Sora talks to Neku and when Riku talks to Ansem. Back Cover has the Wall Run scene and the Master of Masters talking to Lucio. 0.2 has Terra having a mental breakdown. 3 has Sora trying to call Mickey and Riku, and the scene where everyone is all gathered in Yensid's tower. The reason these scenes stick out to me is down to the emotion of it all. They have such raw feelings to them that it makes things feel grander than it really is. Yes, the plot is world ending, but look at the cast of characters that we have that are even aware of what's going on, and it's like 35 at most, and that's if you include people like Merlin and the Twilight Town gang. This is a very simple story that just has a lot of subplots going on. The emotion behind the characters is what sells it. I care when Sora screams about everyone getting swooshed away. Yeah, we know he gets undone, but in the moment, it's still heart-wrenching. The moment where Kairi gets kidnapped is cathartic, but then this happens.
Kyrie! Why her?
It gets me! It gets me in my soul! And that's because of how deep you feel the emotion from Sora, and that makes all the difference. This series is a mess. A hot dumpster fire of a plot that has so much backstory to it surrounding the straightforward plotline of Sora v Xehanort. But people seem to forget that, and it's a shame, because playing 4 games in a demo to get the plot of the final game sounds pretty similar to something like Devil May Cry. The past entries are important for context, but you don't need every scrap of lore to care. One of my old friends said this game was bad, seeing as you can finish it in like 30 hours, and it takes 40 to finish Kingdom Hearts 2, which is only true if A, you do everything flawlessly and only grind using EXP boost abilities in both games, and B, forget the fact that this game is not trying to be Kingdom Hearts 2, it's trying to live up to everyone's expectations. That is the real crux of this game's legacy. It's not that it has something to prove, it's that 99.2% of the fan base wanted the second coming of big gay gaming Jesus and forgot that it was never going to be that. It borrows concepts from past games, like the mushroom-looking Heartless and the world-specific minigames and the plotline that makes me have emotions, but it is unapologetically its own thing while paying homage to its past, like any good sequel does. Before we close out on this massive video, I wanted to give my thoughts on what is the legacy of Kingdom Hearts 3. Spectacle has to be it. No other game I've come across has been this fun to watch or play, while also having so much going on screen at the same time without losing the overall cohesion of the thing in question. Yes, stuff like Riku flying out of Riku into Riku to steal his Riku soul is funny to say, but it relies on context and vagary at the same time, whereas this beautifully hard fight is easy to get and still be beautiful at the same time. The game is so full of wonder and detail that I can't help but get moved whenever I hear a joke or those sick nasty tunes or even go up against a fun boss fight. I've gone over this script several times, making changes and basically proofreading, but I never felt like I needed to cut anything because all of it is relevant to how I feel about the game and everything around it. The series' theme of light conquers darkness that started us off are now more complicated than that. There are several characters who use those ideas in tandem, and even a character who is comprised of darkness who relishes that fact, and it's so different because it's not just, blah, I'm evil, let's have a fight. No, he's literally made of darkness and wants to be whole again. It's a simple change, but I like it. This game, no, this series has meant a lot to so many people, and I've clearly been passionate about it, otherwise I wouldn't have been singing its praises for 60 pages. This stuff matters to us, even if you think it doesn't. To me, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a game of pure joy with a very few minor hiccups, not a clusterfuck with like 2 things going for it. And if you still think that after sitting through all of this, I just have to ask, why? I'm not saying the game is perfect, far from it, but I'm asking you to look at the good with the idea of fun in mind. Is it a fun time? I would say yes, 1,000 times over, and it has certainly colored my perspective on the rest of the series. Sure, the plot isn't 100% airtight, and the attractions are a tad weird, but who cares? Who gives a fuck when you can have moments like this? These are the moments of glory and pure emotion we all crave. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but when it does, it just makes you love a game so much more.
Ansem.
What a journey you and I have had.
You know, it's strange. I think I'm gonna miss you.
Your strength is vaster than darkness. I knew I never stood a chance. Part of me wanted to defy my fate. But when the others betrayed us, I found I did not care. And then, nothing else seemed to matter anymore.
Ansem.
What? It is time to move on, boy. There is more to seek. So go forth now and seek it.
My name is Chris, and I hope you all let your hearts be your guiding keys. God, it's done. It's fucking done. I'm so happy about that. Not that this was a bad thing to make. I loved making every minute of it. It's just, this has been my life for like a year. From concepting to writing to recording to footage gathering to editing to getting the music done. It's all just been one long thing. And I honestly don't know what I'm gonna do after this. I don't know what big project I can think of, anything like that. I don't know. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for sitting through this incoherent ramble of a thing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do it because of you guys. I like doing this stuff for you guys. And I hope I can keep doing stuff like this. And I hope you all enjoyed this. If not, I'm sorry. Tell me what you thought in the comments. But just thank you either way.